If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Ch21. Joys of Teaching 2. It has been several days since Ino's first training and she was slowly getting used to it. After the first day when Hinata sucker punched her in the face, she had her reality check and grudgingly accepted that she wasn't as good as she thought. She even stopped complaining much. Ren took that as a win. The girl wasn't so bad. Oh, she was still annoying at times, but she was slowly growing on Ren. Like fungus. The girls formed a strange form of rivalry and he bemoaned having his own version of Naruto and Sasuke under his tutelage. He had to intervene a few times, but by now, they started to understand his rules and mostly abided by them. The rivalry was good, but it shouldn't cross into animosity just because one of them did better than the other for the moment, and Ren had to do a bit of policing to ensure it stayed healthy. Ino was way weaker, after all, and he didn't want her to be bitter because of it. He wanted her motivated to improve. It put a bit of pressure on Ren, too. He spent his evenings thinking about how to help Ino level the playing field, but so far, Byakugan has been proving to be just unreasonably good when it came to learning how to use chakra. Fortunately, Ino also already knew tree walking due to her clan training, so she was on water walking right now. But unlike Hinata, it was slow going for the blonde girl. So far, Ren had nothing outside of a harebrained stupid idea from Potterverse fanfic whose name he didn't even remember about using Ino's Yamanaka techniques to train in her mindscape. The problem was he didn't know if it was even feasible. Sighing, Ren gestured at the girls who were running laps around the pond that it was enough. They approached him, Hinata as cool as a cucumber, while Ino was panting like a dog. He quickly hid his smile. He still remembered when Hinata was left in a similar state after running, but right now, the girl was milking it for all it was worth, throwing Ino a teasing look and making sure the blonde saw it. Only Ino's panting prevented her lips from stretching into a highly annoyed scowl and starting a verbal tirade. Ren gave Ino a few minutes to calm down while having Hinata practice the second step of Raise Nan. Fortunately, for Ren's mental health, the girl didn't finish the exercise in a moment like the last time. Ren came to understand it happened mostly because the first step was about chakra control, and as a Hyuga, Hinata had a leg up in that. Once she knew the trick to it, which she could see with her Byakugan, it was easy for her. The second step, however, was much more demanding. It required the user to be able to generate a certain force with his chakra. To tightly condense it to generate the grinding pressure. But Hinata was neither a ninja with decades worth of experience like Kakashi or Jiraiya, nor did she have as dense chakra as Naruto. She had a lot of trouble learning the second step because her chakra just wasn't very dense or powerful yet. But a little bit of struggle was good for her. She practiced with the rubber ball for days now and her chakra was slowly becoming better, more dense. That would help her immensely in her life as a ninja later on. Ren came to understand during his stay in this world that Madara and Hashirama did not have that much more chakra than others. The body could contain only so much chakra when it came to quantity. They simply had so dense chakra, so powerful chakra, that it might as well be ocean compared to the cup of water your usual jonin had. For example, that wooden ANBU guy whose name Ren already forgot, could make a tree by using 1% of his chakra. But Hashirama's chakra was so powerful that his 1% could summon an entire forest of poisonous trees. It was simply an issue of quality. But ninjas had no idea how to improve the quality of their chakra other than use it a lot, which was extremely slow. Ren had an inkling the solution would lay in yin and yang release. But his research into it was just in the beginning stages. When Ino had enough rest, she approached Ren and Hinata. I just remembered. My dad told me to give this to you. Ino gave him a scroll. What's that? Hinata curiously asked as Ren pocketed the scroll. Just some theories and exercises on yin chakra. Ren waved her off and she stopped asking, understanding he would not be answering her. Now, then. Ren said and created a shadow clone. Ino, you are going to fight my clone and try to score a hit. He gave her an encouraging smile as the clone beckoned her to follow him, sporting a cheerful grin and throwing a paint bomb up and down in his right hand. Oh, the girl had no idea what was about to hit her. Wait, is that? Hinata's eyes widened. She probably did not think she would ever be on the spectating side of this exercise. Yes. Ren nodded, patting a spot on the grass next to him in an invitation, which she quickly took. Oh. I will enjoy watching this. Hinata licked her lips with an eager expression as she approached him, and Ren had to use his chakra to hide a blush. She was starting to become sexy. And oh, how it burned him inside to think that. But Hinata's bluish-black hair now sported blunt bangs covering her forehead while the rest of her straight hair started reaching her shoulders. It wasn't just the visual aspect that was good when it came to her hair. Ren said a few random things to her during her training, advice and details he noticed and thought could help her, and she seemed to take one of them to heart with her hairstyle choice. Due to her blunt bangs, her hair framing her face, and her tendency to duck her head, her hair could hide her eyes quite well, which could be invaluable for a Hyuga ninja. The initial few seconds her opponent wouldn't realize they were fighting a Hyuga and haphazardly engaged her in a taijutsu battle because she was a girl could prove very fatal for them with her gentle fist. Hinata's hair reminded him a bit of Samui, just in a different color. Her dark hair contrasted very well with her pale complexion and wait. Did she start wearing lipstick? He mentally furrowed his eyebrows while outwardly keeping his expression calm. Honestly, he hadn't noticed. And he was supposed to be the observant one here. Damn. Good for Naruto. He thought, hoping the kid would appreciate how much effort she was putting into looking good. They sat next to each other on the grass, Hinata still trying to do something with her chakra to the rubber ball while Ren had his Fuinjutsu notebook open now, but his attention was more focused on the spar between his clone and Ino that was just starting. Ino did the same exact thing Hinata did during her first try. Just in a lot bolder manner. She ran straight at Ren's clone, her fist cocked back. The result didn't change and Ren enjoyed the squeal of horror as Ino found herself covered in pink color from her head to her toes. Naturally, his clone couldn't just let it go and started teasing her, using the tried and proven method of comparing her to Sakura, which turned the squeal into a scream of impotent rage as she tried to rush Ren's clone again. The pink became mixed with neon red. Ren heard Hinata giggling and he couldn't help but snicker himself. He was almost certain the next color to be added to the mix was yellow. His clone was clearly going for a very hot combination of colors to fit Ino's fiery attitude. After having a good laugh, Ren glanced at Hinata. Speaking of Naruto. I met your classmate a few days ago at the Ichiraku ramen stand. Ren idly breached the topic. Is that why he asked me for help with the academy stuff? Hinata blandly asked, quickly putting two and two together. Seeing Ren nod in affirmation, she huffed, I had to refuse. Why? Ren turned his bewildered gaze away from the entertaining spar and toward her. My father forbade me to interact with him. Hinata sighed, biting her lower lip and clutching the rubber ball in her hands as she refused to return Ren's look. I'd rather not receive his punishment again. Oh. Ren inwardly face-palmed. He had totally forgotten about that. Sorry, I did something unnecessary. Wryly smiling, Ren apologized, realizing he meddled somewhere he wasn't needed nor wanted. It's all right. Hinata said and her hair covered her face, making Ren unable to tell how she truly felt about it. He really didn't like that. Even called me stuck up. She chuckled in a self-depreciating way and Ren felt very bad. This was the problem with somebody who has foreknowledge meddling. He meant well but the circumstances were different and he didn't take that into account, therefore, fucking things up. An awkward silence spread between him and Hinata as they watched Ino get embarrassed and cosplay as a human canvas for modern art. She didn't realize it but her forehead now had I love a duck butt written on it and Ren surmised that she was going to go ballistic after she returned home today and had a look at the mirror. Because Ren was not going to tell her. It was funnier that way. Who knows? Maybe it would cure her of her duck butt obsession. Seeing it lifted his spirit a bit so he decided to start a conversation again and try to get Hinata's focus away from the previous topic. By the way, did your father mention something about me getting another student? Hinata turned to him and tilted her head, no, why? I just expected to be called to explain why I am not putting all my attention on your training by now. Ren hummed. Father does not care. Hinata rolled her eyes, but her tone was a bit sullen, making Ren wince. Another miss. He was on a roll today, wasn't he? I am sorry. He grumpily sighed. But Hinata just chuckled, it's all right. Her eyes narrowed and gained a strong determined glint, I will get ridiculously powerful and then I will punch him in the face. She said, reminding him a bit of the resolution Ino made during the dinner. Ren had to hide his smile with his notebook. He now understood why so many people liked teaching. The thought that this confidence in the usually timid girl was inspired by him was very heartwarming. The good feelings did not last long as Hinata's face suddenly fell. Is it wrong that despite how he treats me, I still love him? She quietly and unsurely asked, ducking her head. No. Ren gently patted her head with a fond smile before turning back toward the spar, I am proud of you. He said the words that made Hinata's heart flutter. "Thank you," she whispered, keeping her head ducked to hide her blush and happy grin with her hair. Ch22. Meeting a bogeyman. Another few days passed and Ino started to notice the small progress she was making. Ren still remembered her jumping up and down in glee when she came to the training one day, shouting about how she beat Kaiba on the track field in the academy during a running competition. Later on, Hinata told Ren that Kaiba was ill and felt really sick that day, but Ren wasn't going to rain on Ino's parade. He let the girl enjoy it. She was improving, after all. He was so proud that he gave the girls a technique on hair manipulation he invented in the academy. He had a lot of time to play around with chakra back then and nothing to do during the lectures. So, he tried to replicate Jiraiya's hair techniques. He figured out how to grow his hair quickly, how to harden or sharpen them, but he failed to figure out how to shoot them like needles. And then he found Fuinjutsu and he never really finished his hair techniques, now that he thought about it. With a sigh, Ren called a waiter and ordered 2 sticks of dango for himself and a box of 9 sticks as a takeout. He was trying a new dango shop for lunch today. But back to his pupils, he promised Hinata these techniques weeks ago but he kinda forgot. So, he had to use the excuse that her hair was too short for them until recently. It was bullshit and sadly, she was going to realize that in the future. But that was a problem for the future Ren. And only if it was brought up by her. He hoped she would forget. Fortunately, a part of the reason he gave them the techniques was that he needed to go on another mission tomorrow so the girls would have a week or so of self-study. He was really curious how far they would get with the technique during his absence. He chuckled as he thought of Ino's expression upon receiving the technique and learning what it was supposed to do. He had probably become her favorite person. After Sasuke, of course. Ren would bet that Ino was going to spend every waking moment practicing it. If only to make her hair look prettier. A fond smile appeared on his lips. Ren's good mood was suddenly interrupted when a one-eyed old man with only one arm came and put a plate with 2 dangos on Ren's table before quietly sitting opposite him, making Ren blink at him. "Aren't you a bit too old and crippled to be working here as a waiter, Grandpa?" Ren smiled but inwardly he wanted to be anywhere but here. Danzo Shimura. Why the hell was his childhood bogeyman here? He still remembered the nights full of nightmares when he was a child about how Danzo would kidnap him. For years, he feared it. But with each year, Ren became less and less fearful, and more weary. He remembered being tired of being afraid. Thinking back, he did go to the same orphanage as Naruto so it was probably well monitored so Danzo couldn't most likely do anything. And when Ren joined the academy, he kept himself in the middle of the pack. Neither disappointing nor praiseworthy. Just another generic civilian-born orphan ninja. Danzo probably didn't have a reason to approach him until now. So, why the hell is he here? Ren mentally went through the possible reasons until his mind stopped on one possibility. During the mission in the Land of Waves, he found a document stating that Gato was supplying somebody in Konoha with talented orphans for money. Gato probably kept it as a blackmail but Ren knew that the document was not worth the paper it was written on. So, he didn't bother with it. Neither the Hokage nor the daimyo would do anything about it anyway. Whoever was buying the kids, and even then it was obvious to Ren that it was Danzo, never signed anything himself. Everything was done by a proxy. Well, no matter. It wasn't like Ren was afraid of the man anymore. He was still cautious and there was no way Ren would be meeting his eyes anytime soon, but that was just common sense. Not fear. The man did possess Shisui's Mangekyo, after all. Fortunately, he would need eye contact to use it. "I take it you know who I am, then?" Danzo stated, the man's eyebrow didn't even slightly twitch at the provocation. He was a ninja longer than Ren lived. He wouldn't break his composure because of some childish insult. Ren clicked his tongue. There went his peaceful lunch. He had to give it to Danzo. Ninjas in a dango shop within a ninja village? Ren never suspected a thing up until the moment Danzo showed up. But for this to work, the shopkeeper would have also needed to be one of Danzo's. Ren regretfully glanced at the dango on the table. This shop was famous for its dango and he was so looking forward to it. "You can eat it. It's not poisoned." Ren chuckled, "I don't trust you." Danzo nodded and took one dango stick, taking a bite. "I paid for that," Ren dryly said, before sighing. "Well, whatever." He decided to just go along with it and took the other stick of dango as he put a paper in the middle of the table. Danzo looked at the paper but kept his composure and just turned back toward Ren and raised his eyebrow. An exploding tag. MHM. This one can level this entire building. Ren leisurely said and continued to eat the dango as if he hadn't just stated he put an explosive within arm's reach of the Konoha's council elder. Just a precaution. I heard you are not a man to be trifled with. Besides, you brought your bodyguards and that makes me feel uneasy. Ren glanced over the room. He counted 6 but there were probably more of them hidden. All on guard and prepared to pounce at him. Yikes. Maybe Ren was just imagining it but there was just a teeny little bit of respect that was missing before in Danzo's expression now. You would blow yourself up. And why wouldn't I? Ren asked with an amused smile, preparing to spew the bullshit of a lifetime. It's for my will of fire. I see. Danzo impassively said. Ren was a bit confused but shrugged it off. These words worked almost all the time even though he didn't think they had a proper unified meaning. They meant whatever the speaker wanted them to mean. It was a truly convenient phrase. Nevertheless, I came bearing an offer to you. There is a special secret division of ninjas under my leadership. We noticed your efforts in the Land of Waves where you assisted in bringing down Zabuza and your abilities as a teacher for young ninjas and a seal user. We could use a man of your talents. Join us for the greater good of Konoha and prove your will of fire. Danzo said, almost showing a bit of passion. But Ren just continued looking at him with a dry look for a moment, causing the atmosphere to turn awkward. Inwardly, he was surprised Danzo had the brass balls to speak so casually about Root. Then again, he didn't exactly name it and Ren had no proof. He could go to the Hokage and repeat this entire conversation to him and it wasn't like Danzo would get in trouble for it. It would be the word of a councilman against the word of a fresh chunin. In fact, Ren was certain that if he did that, the whole situation would be spun so against his favor it wouldn't even be funny. Danzo simply held a lot more influence and authority in the village than Ren. People like him had their ways. No thanks. Ren casually rejected the offer anyway. He had kept a low profile up till now to avoid exactly this kind of situation. But here they were and this happened anyway. There was no reason to stay polite right now. Danzo wasn't going to disappear into thin air just because Ren wished for it hard enough. It was time to be assertive. Danzo hummed at that answer and gave Ren a thoughtful look, tapping his finger on the table for a few seconds before opening his mouth again. I am Konoha's elder and can make life very difficult for you in this village. Ren snorted, yes. But there is just one small problem with that. I signed up to serve the Hokage. Not you. Unless you have a signed order from the Hokage that says I am under you now. Of course, he wouldn't have that. Root was supposed to be disbanded after the Uchiha massacre and Danzo was just an advisor. There was no way to get such a document for him. How would he even justify it to the Hokage? He wasn't supposed to have subordinates anymore. Even if he tried to falsify it, there would be no way to falsify the Hokage's special stamp that he kept on himself at all times. Besides, Danzo could make things hard for him. Sure. Promotion was basically unattainable now that Danzo would actively boycott it. With his influence in the council and other Konoha's departments, Ren could save the village from pain and he would still not get that Jonin rank. But the joke was on Danzo. Ren didn't want to be promoted anyway. There were other things Danzo could probably do but nothing overly blatant. Oh, Ren had no doubt that life was going to turn a lot more dangerous for him now. But it was still a better outcome than obediently becoming one of Danzo's little slaves. Thought so. Ren retorted when Danzo stayed silent. Not wanting to hear more threats or attempts to persuade him, he grabbed the exploding tag from the table and sealed it into the seal on his wrist before he gave Danzo a two-fingered salute, and disappeared into a puff of smoke, showing that he was just a shadow clone. Back at the training ground 41, Ren suddenly turned his head toward Konoha, his lips set in a frown before he released a groan and shook his head. He sent that damn clone for his lunch and not only was he late, enjoying dango, but he also gave him a headache. The worst part? His clone forgot to seal the takeout box before he popped. How troublesome. Ren rubbed his neck. Ch23. Lunatics. All of them. A day had passed since Ren's unwanted meeting with Danzo and he was currently at Konoha's gate, checking his supplies and sealing scrolls to ensure he brought with him everything he needed. The unfortunate part of being a ninja was that if you were sent on some important mission, refusing was not an option. And this mission came from the Barrier Corps themselves. Because of the hostilities between Konoha and Kiri that sparkled in the Land of Waves, the village was putting in the effort to ensure all detection seals along the coastline borders of the Land of Fire were functional. Because of that, the barrier core was spread thin. This would usually be a job for a jonin from the barrier core, or someone who was chunin for longer than Ren. But none of these were available right now, so Ren had to go. Honestly, he was surprised it took this long for him to be deployed. There were only 300-ish people in the barrier core. Fuinjutsu was not very popular, after all. The village already doubled the required weekly quota of exploding tags each member staying in the village had to produce because so many of them now had to run around the borders, checking these seals. The preparations for war were in full swing. Most ninjas in Konoha did not believe it would go that far. Kiri was in a very bad spot. They definitely could not start another war. But Konoha could not afford not to be prepared. Inwardly nodding to himself when he confirmed he had everything, Ren briefly greeted Izumo and Katetsu, handing them the necessary paperwork that confirmed he was going on a mission, and then he was on his way. The anime always made it seem that travel time was short. During the Land of Wave arc, Team 7 fought the Demon Brothers and it seemed as if the confrontation with Zabuza happened right after that. As if it was on the same day. But it most certainly wasn't. The elemental nations were huge. For example, when Gaara was captured by the Akatsuki, Naruto had to run for 3 days to reach Tsunagakure from Konoha. That always sounded like so little time for Ren in his previous life. After all, if a normal person in his past life ran for 3 days, how far could he possibly get? But his perception was limited back then. He knew that ninjas ran far faster than normal humans, but he had no idea just how much faster. A Jonin level running speed tempo on an emergency mission like that was around 100 km per hour. They could go as fast as a car on a motorway. Ren did not have anything to measure the speed with. But this was his rough estimate of the speed a Jonin could sustain long term. Counting in the need to sleep, eat, make camp, and the fact that Naruto's team was caught in the sandstorm, they still ran for 15 hours a day for 2 days and spent the last day waiting out the sandstorm. So, based on that, the distance between Konoha and Suna was something like 3,000 kilometers. And Ren was really lowballing it. It was probably more along the lines of 3,500 kilometers. Ren couldn't be sure. It was not as if anybody measured it. This world had just exited its medieval stage. And they were still deep in feudal society. Distance between cities was still measured by how many days you had to walk to reach your destination. The border base Ren was going to for his mission was near the Land of Waves. But even though it was still in the same country, Ren would still have to cross several hundred kilometers. It took a week to reach the Land of Waves from Konoha with civilian walking speed. During Ren's last mission over there, his team still had to run for the entire day to catch up with Kurane and her team. Ren could get there in maybe 17 hours of running if he pushed himself. But he had to be mindful of ambushes, so he didn't go as fast as he could. The meeting with Danzo was making him a bit paranoid. The traveling was very bothersome. It's easy to talk about running for the whole day, but actually doing it. It was Ren's most hated thing in his new life. He hated it even more than physical drills. Loathed it with his very soul. It was just so freaking boring. He couldn't even go through his Fuinjutsu work in his head because he had to be on guard. The scenery was just the same all the way long. Trees over here, trees over there, trees everywhere. Ren did think of using the transportation seal he had in the Land of Waves and leg it to the border base from there. It would take him maybe an hour, max 2 if he did that. But the seal was still a secret and he did not need the questions about how he got there so fast or why he came from outside of Konoha's borders. He could sneak in, but the Land of Waves was teeming with Konoha ninjas right now because of the conflict. It would take only one of them spotting Ren for some uncomfortable questions to arise. So, as vexing as it was, Ren had to do the old-fashioned thing and obediently run there all the way from Konoha. Of course, he was etching his transportation seals with his chakra on bigger rocks and burying them into the ground with earth technique a bit away from the main road every 200 kilometers or so along the way. Just so he could avoid something bothersome as travel time the next time he was sent on a mission on this side of the Land of Fire. Honestly, he didn't even care that his transportation seal could not be used in combat. No matter what he did during his experiments, it just didn't work, and he was starting to suspect that Hiraishin worked very differently from his own teleportation design. But who cared? The fast travel was very much worth it, even if using the seal took 20 seconds of concentration. Well, once he had set up a network of beacon seals, that is. The next day, Ren finally reached the border base, bored, tired, and swearing he was going to make a seal that would prevent his body from being besieged by forest insects even if it killed him. Of course, then he had to spend an hour going through various procedures to confirm his identity because ninjas were paranoid and the mission scroll from the Hokage was not enough for them. In any other situation, Ren would applaud their caution. But now he was just annoyed. He had barely avoided being thrown into jail by proving that he was indeed a seal practitioner here to repair their detection seals before he was shown into a small room with a very uncomfortable cot. He may as well sleep on the floor. That's how comfortable it was. Plus the room was chilly. They clearly did not even bother to invest in heating for the base. Ren groaned and decided to just set up a few heating seals on the walls before sleeping. He was also going to store a comfortable bed in a ceiling scroll the next time he went on a mission. An hour later, he was finally finished making the room at least somewhat comfortable for him and laid on the cot, hoping he would sleep easily. As he was falling asleep, he suddenly remembered all these people in his past world who would give anything to be in his place. Ren just inwardly snorted. How could anybody actually desire to be reborn into this world and be a ninja was beyond him. Going on missions was pure torture. Lunatics. All of them. Ch24. Kigo. Hello. A man in his early 20s with mousy brown hair and a bit of stubble suddenly sat next to Ren in the cafeteria of the border base and cheerfully greeted him. I am Kigo. I will be escorting you to the detection seals. One of them is faulty for sure, but I don't know about the rest. He stretched his hand that held his chopsticks toward Ren's place but stopped when Ren caught his wrist and gave him an unamused look. Come on, man. Kigo pouted like a kid, trying to give Ren a puppy dog gaze, just a bite. Ren had to admit, disturbingly enough, that it was working a bit. But he quickly shook himself. Get your own. Fine. Kigo whined before standing up. I'll be right back. He huffily walked toward the counter where they distributed the food. Ren just watched his back with a bewildered look, thinking, what the fuck just happened, as his introverted nature tried to come to terms with Kigo's extrovert behavior. It didn't take long for Kigo to return with a plate of food of his own, and despite people seated at many different tables waving at him to join them, he sat down opposite Ren once again, a friendly grin on his face as he dug in. With a frown, Ren spoke, You seem familiar. I seem to recognize you from somewhere. It was really bugging him too. No idea. As far as I know, this is the first time we are meeting, buddy. Kigo casually shrugged and Ren nodded. Yes, he was sure he would remember somebody so annoyingly outgoing. Then again, I am very handsome. Kigo grasped his chin and posed a bit with a smirk etched on his face. Maybe a female friend of yours has a poster of me in her bedroom? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. He wiggled his eyebrows. Ren laughed. He could see why so many people here seemed to like him. It was funny because Kigo was definitely not handsome. He was not ugly, but he had a long way to go to be a pretty boy. He kinda reminded Ren of a more muscular Shaggy. The only thing the man lacked was Scooby-Doo. As he thought that, Ren's mind suddenly clicked. He remembered having similar thoughts in the past. The bingo book. He said with realization, you have a C-rank bounty from IWA. The earthbender Kigo. Kigo's good mood suddenly seemed to be ruined and his shoulders slumped. Ugh. Don't remind me. I really messed up and my parents were very angry at me for getting it. I prefer to ignore that it ever happened. He scowled, glaring at his food. Contrary to the popular belief in his past life, bounties were not fun. Ninjas didn't want them. In stories in his previous worlds, people used them as some sort of level system. The higher the bounty, the more powerful the character. And they made the characters happy about getting more bounty as it raised their value, or something. That's not how it worked in the real world. For a ninja, having a bounty meant two things. Either they were in the field so long and they were so effective that their work was noticed, or they fucked up. Ninjas were supposed to be unnoticed during their more unsavory jobs. Having a bounty meant being a criminal in the country of origin of said bounty. Not many people talked about this. But ninjas were criminals. Their profession demanded it from them. Assassination, kidnapping, sabotage, spying, prostitution, threats, massacres, all ninja villages did these things to an extent. If you get a mission to blow up a bridge in another country and you are noticed, you won't be congratulated for a job well done. The less said about massacring a civilian village in another country because a rich merchant paid your village enough money for it. Oh, the villages tried to show a friendly face to the rest of the world to attract customers. But when it came to these unsavory well-paid missions, the cage's mindset usually was along the lines, if we don't do it and take the money, another village certainly will. so, if it happens anyway, we might as well be the ones paid for it. Naruto truly did not understand the things Hokage did. The missions he signed on to get money for the village. So, if a person had a bounty on their head, they were either somebody a cage or a noble wanted dead for some reason, or they did something naughty enough in another country, making them put a price on their head. The latter was far more common. And with having a bounty, came problems. Kakashi can't vacation in the Earth country because he would have 6 squads of IWA hunter ninjas after his ass the second he is spotted over there. Having a bounty meant having bounty hunters, rogue ninjas, and even ninjas from other villages after your head. And in this world, people like Kakuzu exist. Having a bounty was most definitely not a joyous occasion. It made some low-end ninja tremble in fear for their lives. The system wouldn't exist if it wasn't a good enough deterrent. Alright, Shaggy. Ren jested, I get it. No talking about the drinks at the bar we could afford if we cashed in your head. That made the gloom around Kigo subside a bit and his lips twitched into the beginnings of a smile. Shaggy. He raised his eyebrow at Ren. But Ren just nonchalantly shrugged and pointed at him with his chopsticks. You look like Shaggy. Oh. Kigo scrunched his forehead in thought, probably wondering who the hell was Shaggy. Not that he would be figuring that out anytime soon. Ren thought the man would ask, but then he just grinned again in an uncaring manner and exclaimed, I like it. You heard that, boys? Call me Shaggy from now on. Kigo stood up and shouted to the rest of the room, getting back jeers and cheers as people raised their glasses in acknowledgement while Ren stared in dumbstruck silence at the spectacle. Does that mean we can't call you dumbass anymore? Somebody from the crowd shouted and the room erupted into abrupt laughter that only stopped a moment later when the commander of the base showed up. Shut up, you idiots. You are heard all the way to IWA. The commander shouted, huffing and puffing in anger as he turned toward Kigo with a stern gaze, murder in his eyes. Opsy. Kigo sheepishly chuckled. Honestly, watching Kigo get a stern scolding for almost enticing a rebellion due to his sheer stupidity was the highlight of Ren's day. He had barely known Kigo for an hour, but he had to say, he liked the guy. Ch25. The seal inspection. After breakfast, Kigo still had something to do, so Ren had to wait for him until lunch before they finally left to inspect the detection seals. It sounded important. The detection seal system. But it was far less impressive than it sounded. Which was why nobody was rushing Ren to go and have a look at it. It was just one component of the border security here, and it wasn't even all that effective. The regular patrols with sensor ninjas probably caught more intruders than these seals. Especially since the seals were in the forest a few kilometers away from the shoreline. But it was like locking the door to the house after already locking the gate. It simply added a bit more security. The security seals send a signal to the master seal at the border base whenever somebody with a genin level chakra or more passes near them. But their range is only around 50 meters, and unfortunately, there are quite large gaps between the seal placements. The border was just too wide to have these seals every 50 meters, so they were only in key spots. Plus, it was obvious to Ren that they were painted by a single person, so probably not many in the barrier corps could create them, which limited how many could Konoha put near each border base. It also showed how stretched thin the barrier corps were to send a fresh Chunin for this maintenance run. But he wouldn't complain. There were some benefits for him from it. When Ren saw the first detection seal, he instantly had several ideas on how to improve them, but he didn't act on it. If he did so, the Konoha's higher UPS would definitely have him run all around the Land of Fire's border, adjusting every single one of these seals to be better. It would take him years. No. This was not the time to show off. This was the time to shut up and do his job, and only his job. He would keep his ideas and create something for himself based on them later on. So, how are things back in Konoha? Kigo asked after Ren checked the 10th seal and they were on their way to the 11th, probably bored out of his mind. They were supposed to stay silent and on guard, but the man was a genuine chatterbox and clearly found it hard. Ren shrugged, I don't know. The same as always? Peaceful? The village is preparing for sure, but the overall atmosphere did not change. That's good. Kigo happily smiled, I really wish this conflict would end soon. Sitting in the border base all day is boring. Can't wait to get back home, you know. Somebody waiting for you. Ren teased. Kigo rubbed his nose in embarrassment, hee. I have a childhood sweetheart back in Konoha. I miss her. That's nice. It really was. Ren was happy for him. She didn't agree to go out with me yet, but... Kigo awkwardly turned his head away from Ren, making his lips twitch. Say no more. Let me guess. Ren rubbed his chin, pretending to be deep in thought before he deadpanned, she doesn't know she is your childhood sweetheart. It frankly wouldn't surprise him with how the man acted. Low blow. Kigo huffed, but no. I didn't ask her out yet. I wanted to. But I kinda chickened out, hee. He blushed before his shoulders slumped. Ha, I feel like a loser. But I'll ask her out the second I return from this mission. I already made up my mind. They walked in silence for a few moments because Ren genuinely didn't know what to say next. Fortunately, Kigo wasn't short for words. What about you? Anybody waiting for you back home? He asked, making Ren's eyebrows furrow as he considered the answer. Not really. I am tutoring 2 academy students back in Konoha, but I don't think that counts. Female students. Kigo threw Ren a mischievous grin. But Ren just rolled his eyes at the man-child. Does it matter? Yes. Kigo sagely nodded. They are girls. Ren dryly said. Ooh. Kigo's grin widened, and do you want to have sex with them? Ren didn't expect such a blunt question. Not even from Kigo. So, it almost made him miss his next step. After finding his balance, he turned toward Kigo and retorted, they are 14. That's not a no. Kigo helpfully informed Ren with a small shrug, making Ren snort. Fuck you. I am straight. Kigo casually shook his head in refusal. Ren threw him an irritated look and muttered under his nose, could have fooled me. Still not a no. Kigo reminded Ren in a sing-song voice, making Ren sigh in exasperation. You need Jesus. Ren said, speeding up his walking speed and leaving Kigo slightly behind. Kigo owlishly blinked, who? Quickly catching up with Ren, Kigo decided to change the topic, probably recognizing he was pushing a little bit too far into Ren's comfort zone with his teasing. Anyway, we should totally go out for drinks back home. I can introduce you to a few chicks. Ren glanced at him, noticing that he was actually serious right now, and slightly smiled. I thought you were the guy who had problems confessing to your childhood friend? How come you know chicks? Are there a lot of chicken coops near your house? Kigo just waved the question off. Looking at you, you will need somebody who can take the reins. A dominatrix per ha. Alright. He wasn't as serious as Ren thought. Ren's fist sprang up and almost smashed into Kigo's shoulder, but the man barely managed to jump back while shouting, Otto. Hey! What was that for? I'll show you dominatrix. I'll tie you up and leave you inside the land of Earth borders if you try that. Ren threatened in a light-hearted tone. You don't need to go that far. I was just joking, brother. Kigo pouted and petulantly crossed his arms on his chest. Right. Because I am sure if I let you set up a blind date for me, Anko Mitarashi would totally not show up, yet. Ren retorted with a small amused smirk. He did contemplate for a moment if it would be worth it. He was interested in Orochimaru's cursed seal, but meeting a psycho like Anko. Ren wasn't very enthusiastic about it. You know me so well already. Kigo interrupted Ren's thoughts, you really are my brother from another mother. Ren blinked at that, finding it hard to believe Kigo said this to him. You said the same thing to the guard just 3 hours ago. Right in front of me. He dryly said, giving Kigo a disbelieving look. Well, it works. Kigo awkwardly defended, rubbing the back of his head while his cheeks slightly flushed from embarrassment. Ren would bet the man forgot he said the same thing to the guard. Anyway, we are almost there. That detection seal is definitely faulty. Kigo seriously said, switching the topic and trying to pretend the previous few seconds did not happen. Ren contemplated for a moment if he should tease him further, but seeing the nervous look in his brown eyes, he decided to cut him some slack. How'd you know? He asked, focusing on the faulty seal instead. I tried crossing near it, but apparently, nothing was noticed back at the base. It clearly doesn't work. Kigo said as they approached a big rock reaching up to Ren's torso, sitting in the middle of the forest among the trees. It's on the rock. They came closer to the rock and Ren put his palm on it, pulsing his chakra in a specific way too. The seal suddenly appeared on the rock and Ren frowned. More than faulty, it looked disru. His eyes instantly widened as his ears caught a slight noise from behind and he jumped away from the rock, not even having enough time to shout out a warning for Kigo as swishing sounds passed the place he stood at just a split second ago. Ren landed horizontally on a tree trunk in a crouch and looked back toward the rock, only to grimace in sadness as he saw Kigo riddled with several kunai handles deep in various parts of his body. The one going straight through the middle of his neck was definitely fatal even if he somehow miraculously survived the others. Releasing a sad breath, Ren glanced around the treetops and noticed 4 ninjas, all wearing a blank ANBU mask, making Ren curse under his nose, but he didn't have the time to complain as he quickly had to jump away from the tree he stood on before a fireball smashed into it. Ch26. Ambush. Ren gritted his teeth as he barely evaded another kunai and cursed himself for getting careless. Kigo was so easygoing that Ren had to ashamedly admit it rubbed on him. He didn't even create a shadow clone to shadow him before he started to inspect the seals. So, he now had to fight on an unprepared battlefield, and if he created a shadow clone now, his enemies would instantly notice and be wary. He needed to be out of sight for that move to be effective. Another ninja suddenly appeared behind Ren, slashing his tanto at his back. With no other choice, Ren pulsed his chakra outward while refining it into wind chakra, and suddenly, a wave of slightly pressurized air blew everything around Ren away from him, the attacking ninja included. It was a variant of wind release breakthrough technique, but because the wind wasn't released in one direction, it wasn't concentrated enough to cause injuries. So, Ren's attacker just somersaulted in the air and landed on his feet a few meters away, ready to jump again at Ren. Having now 5 ninjas surround him instead of 4 made Ren inwardly groan, but he suspected there was still 1 or 2 hiding. It was a standard tactic to show a part of the assassination team, lulling the target into a false sense of security as the hiding members struck from the shadows. Ren connected a chakra string with a tree trunk 6 meters to his left and managed to slingshot his body out of the trajectory of water bullet jutsu that instead crashed into the tree that was behind Ren a moment ago, cracking its bark as Ren once again landed in a crouch on a tree. This time, however, he instantly jumped toward one of his assailants while throwing a kunai at another. The one Ren tried to engage pulled out tanto just as Ren's kunai was parried by his other target, but barely before Ren reached his opponent, the kunai the other ninja parried exploded with a resounding boom, painting the ground and the surrounding trees with his blood and torn pieces of his body from the metal shrapnel. Ren didn't hesitate, and instead of pressing on with his attack, he used the moment to jump back into the canopy, disappearing into it. As he landed, he noticed with a backward glance that under the spot he stood a rock spike suddenly burst from the ground and a bead of sweat appeared on his brow as he realized how close to death he was. If he pressed on with the attack, he would have gotten skewered. If he tried to sink into the ground as he for a moment thought of doing, he wouldn't have made it, and his upper body would have sported a new unwanted hole by now. These fiv, Ren noticed that none of the remaining 4 ninjas around had their hands joined in hand seals, and the guy splattered around the forest ground in pieces certainly wasn't the source of the rock spike either. These 6 ninjas were clearly a highly trained assassination squad. Their teamwork was impeccable and their attacks covered each other's blind spots. They were at least low-level jonins too. Ren didn't need to wonder who sent them. Danzo's face appeared in Ren's mind. Then again, there was a non-zero chance that these 6 ninjas were indeed from Kiri, and Ren was just at the wrong place at the wrong time. It wasn't just Danzo's goons that wore blank masks. The anime used that to differentiate them, but in reality, even regular ANBU from Konoha and other villages wore blank masks when on secret missions. But somehow, Ren doubted this was a Kiri operation despite the fact the 6 were dressed the part. From his hiding place, Ren saw one of the ninjas point his finger toward him just as 2 others had their hands flickering through various hand seals. Oh, shit! A sensor! Alarms rang through Ren's mind as the 2 ninjas finished their techniques and one spewed a wind bullet while the other used another fireball, both merging and becoming much stronger and bigger as they flew straight at Ren. Knowing that using fire was a deliberate choice on their part because they saw him use wind, Ren didn't try to use a jutsu. He just threw another exploding kunai at the fireball and used the ensuing explosion to block it. But Ren's opponents were too experienced to believe the fireball would be enough. Before he could counterattack, he had already a hail of shuriken flying at him. Jumping down from the canopy to avoid them, Ren threw a kunai at the ground in between the ninjas. They didn't fall for it. Knowing what happened to their late comrade, they didn't try to block it and simply jumped away. It gave Ren the necessary seconds to start his counterattack. One of the ninjas, the censor, evaded the kunai by jumping closer to Ren, and that proved fatal to him when Ren appeared behind him and smacked an exploding tag right on the middle of his back before sinking into the ground. The man clearly panicked and tried to take his vest off, but Ren deliberately made that particular tag have a short fuse. The man wasn't even halfway done with undressing when it exploded and his body was ripped into bloody confetti of bones and pieces of meat. 3 seconds later, Ren burst from the ground under another enemy, the kunao in his hand aiming to burrow itself into the man's thigh to sever a major artery. But his attack was prevented when the hiding ninja, the one that used the rock spike, also appeared from the ground, his tonto blocking Ren's kunao before trying to send him flying away with a kick. Without the gravity seals, Ren was much faster, though, and he was about to break the man's leg at the knee when he was forced to retreat because the other two remaining enemies regained their wits too quickly and were about to skewer him with shurikens. Noticing the earth spike using ninja trying to use a jutsu again, Ren jumped into the air, barely managing to avoid an earth spike only for the man he failed to kill to spew a fireball at him. Ren dodged the fireball by pushing his body further up into the air with an application of wind chakra, only to notice 4 kunao flying at him from his blind spot. They were already far too close and he didn't have prepared anything for substitution, nor did he have the time to mold more wind chakra. There was no evading them. Twisting his body in mid-air, Ren winced as a kunao buried itself deep in his shoulders, but he managed to barely avoid the other 3 lethal hits, getting only 2 bloody scratches, one across his right biceps while the other on his left thigh, while the last kunao didn't hit him at all. It was much preferable to having them hit important organs or arteries. Unfortunately, the slight distraction from pain caused Ren to react a moment too late, and the follow-up attack, a water bullet, smashed into his body that was still in the air and propelled him toward a tree. Ren's back painfully impacted the tree and he felt a rib or two snapping. Managing to ignore the pain, Ren instantly sent a chakra string toward a nearby tree and used it to pull his body away, just in time to avoid the finishing move, a wind bullet that completely shredded the tree trunk he previously smashed into. Ren twisted his body, grimacing as he smacked into a tree with his uninjured shoulder. Due to the haste, he couldn't control the force behind his chakra string, so the landing was rough. But at least he was still alive. He instantly threw a smoke bomb under him to gain a few precious seconds and put his hand on the tree trunk. A seal slowly spread from his fingers onto the tree in the span of 3 seconds, just as a wind from some wind-release jutsu blew the smoke away. Ren threw his body to the side, evading yet another salvo of kunao as he activated the seal. It was a magnetic seal supposed to attract everything magnetic. Ren had his gear sealed in storage seals, so the only magnetic thing was his head protector, but he had already stored that into a seal too. The other ninjas didn't have the same luxury and the seal affected them. It disrupted their following attack as their bodies were yanked in the direction of the seal by all the kunao, shuriken, and tonto they had on their person. The seal was too far away from them, so the pull wasn't especially strong. At best, it brought Ren a few precious seconds as they stumbled, but it was enough as he suddenly noticed a scroll flying through the air above the tree line and his lips widened into a relieved smile. Feeling a pull of substitution, Ren didn't fight it and let it whisk him away as his body was substituted with a shadow clone he made underground after dealing with the sensor ninja. He appeared some distance away from the battlefield, in time to see the sealing scroll his clone threw into the air burst open, sending a veritable storm of paper tags all around. The 4 ninjas who had only just recovered from their stumbling due to magnetic pull only managed to widen their eyes as they were abruptly covered in exploding tags, the seals on the tags already glowing red. Ren watched as the scenery in front of him exploded into uncountable flaming balls followed by booming sounds of explosions, and he had to brace himself against a tree to not be thrown away by the ensuing wave of uncomfortably hot air that hit him, making him close his eyes on instinct. For 15 seconds, the world turned into a fiery loud hell. When it was all over and Ren opened his eyes again, in the radius of 50 meters around the scroll, where the forest was full of trees, were now just numerous molten craters. Ren flopped onto the ground with a groan, completely spent. Note to self: make a finishing move that you can use with your body still in the blast zone. He inwardly grumbled. This move was supposed to be used just before he teleported with his transportation seal, but his opponents didn't exactly give him 20 seconds to concentrate for the teleport to happen. It was insane how coordinated they were and how little time to react they had given him. This was the hardest fight he had so far. It had shown him quite a few of his shortcomings. Fighting 6 jonins at once was definitely not a fun experience. Ren leaned his back on a tree behind him and pulled out the kunao from his shoulders with a wince of pain. Now he just had to wait for the border patrol to come and carry him back to the base. The explosions were surely noticed and a team was definitely on its way by now. Ren just had to rest, and think how to screw Danzo's day for this after he returned to the village. Ch27. Home away from home. Ngh. Ren groaned as he woke up and hugged his pillow closer to his chest, lying in a comfortable bed in pure bliss. It had been a week since the ambush and he was finally back in Konoha. After the ambush, nothing interesting really happened, and Ren had to grit his teeth through the inspection of the remaining detection seals because they did not have a proper medic ninja on staff in the border base. The medic there was barely an apprentice and didn't know that green glowy handjob technique Sakura was so proud of. Thinking of it like that made Ren grin and press his face into his pillow, enjoying its softness. He truly missed it during that blasted mission. But then he had to wince as he put a bit too much pressure on his chest and a flare of pain briefly assaulted him. The medic at the border base just ensured his ribs were set right so they could heal properly on their own. When Ren finally arrived back in Konoha yesterday, the hospital was the first place he visited, but the medics there saw that his ribs were already half healed and decided not to waste their chakra on him since his injury was not urgent. Ren had received a month of paid medical leave and was told to let his ribs heal naturally. On the one hand, it was great and he evaded a lot of busy work for the next month. On the other, living with broken ribs was not a fun experience. Then again, Ren had kind of gotten used to it during the past week. His excuse for arriving in Konoha yesterday when he actually left the border base 5 days ago was that he opted to walk instead of running due to his injury. But that wasn't the truth. Ren took a detour to the capital of the Land of Fire and splurged his savings by buying a small house there. It hurt his wallet somewhat fiercely, but fortunately, ninjas earned a lot of money and Ren didn't need many ninja supplies for his combat style. The highest expense for seal users would be the chakra ink, but ever since Ren figured out how to edge seals with his chakra alone, he hadn't used chakra ink, saving thousands of ryo every week. That shit was crazy expensive. Other than that, Ren bought a set of kunao here and there, but that was it. Most of his money for missions and supplying the village with the exploding tags on a weekly basis was saved, plus he still had some of the money the Akimichi clan paid him for the new recipes. By now, he had enough for a house in the capital. The reason why Ren bothered with this was Danzo. Ren didn't truly think the old bastard would attack him inside Konoha. That would be a bit too much even for him. Public order and safety were a big thing in Konoha. In the village full of killers, the higher UPS can't have ninjas sneaking into each other's houses and assassinating people. The village had to remain a safe oasis from the violence in their life. It had to remain a place where ninjas serving it could feel safe and wouldn't need to be constantly on guard. Their whole system was built on that principle. So, no, Ren didn't think Danzo would go far enough to break this unwritten rule. That said, Uchiha massacre. Ren would rather err on the side of caution. He also didn't fancy having to fear an assassin sneaking into his house while he was sleeping. So, he simply put a transportation seal into his house in the capital city, and when he arrived at his apartment in Konoha, Ren spent 4 hours putting up numerous seals all around it for security and surveillance purposes, connecting them to a master seal that he could use to access the seals no matter how far away he was from them. Then, he used the transportation seal and hopped into his house in the capital for a good night's sleep. The best way to avoid assassins in Konoha and sleep without needing to be on guard was naturally to not be in Konoha at all. Even if the supposed assassin did get through Ren's security seals, he would not find him at home during the night, and it only took 20 seconds for Ren to use his transportation seal to pop in and out of Konoha anyway. Of course, this was technically a treason. Ninjas were forbidden to leave their village without permission. That was a major rule. Doing so was tantamount to desertion, and if a ninja did that, it would instantly earn him the rank of rogue ninja, and hunter ninjas would be sent to either retrieve or kill him depending on his value to the village. Izumo and Katetsu, who always guard the gate, are not there for its protection. They are basically clerks who are supposed to check if every ninja leaving the village has the proper permission. If not, the ANBU team on the real gate guard duty would deal with it. That always irked Ren. In his past life, he was used to a bit more freedom of movement. In the end, Ren decided that what the Konoha higher UPS don't know won't bother them. Konoha was big and there was no rule that a ninja had to spend their night in their house. Plus, ninjas popped in and out of places constantly. There was no way to prove that Ren was not inside the village even if they had seen him disappear via his transportation seal. Most low-end ninjas would just write it off as shunshin anyway, and Ren was not going to use that seal in front of Jonins anytime soon. The only ninja capable of teleportation in the recent past was the 4th Hokage anyway. There was no way the other ninjas would believe some unknown, fresh chunin could achieve the same feat. Their very own preconceived notions would prevent them from seeing it. Suddenly, an alarm seal rang, fully waking Ren from his sleep and making him grumble as he sluggishly put his hand on the paper tag with the master seal to his home security that was lying on the bedside table. The master seal connected with the detection seal Ren shamelessly plagiarized and improved upon, working in tandem with other surveillance seals of his, and Ren's mind was abruptly filled with a vague mental map of his apartment in Konoha. There was somebody in front of his door, and the alarm rang not because they tried to get in but because they knocked on the door. From their chakra levels, Ren could say they were about high genin. He didn't have a surveillance seal outside his home in fear that somebody would recognize it, so he didn't see who was in front of his door. But he didn't need a seal to deduce that it was Hinata. Ruefully sighing and getting out of his bed, Ren put a loose shirt on himself and used the transportation seal to pop back into his apartment in Konoha. Opening the door wearing only the shirt and shorts while having his right hand under his shirt and absent-mindedly rubbing his stomach, Ren saw the wide-eyed Hyuga girl holding a basket while staring at him in open-mouthed wonder. Ren owlishly blinked and then almost let out a petulant whine when he noticed the veins around her eyes bulging out. "You just appeared in your house out of nowhere. Did you teleport?" she excitedly asked, clutching the basket to her chest while her creepy eyes almost sparkled in curiosity. Hearing her, Ren face-palmed with a groan. "Of course, my Hyuga student was obviously going to abuse her Byakugan as I taught her, and my secret would be out before the first day ended. Lately, my luck is just superb, isn't it?" he wryly complained in his mind as he ushered Hinata in. Ch28 Visits. Turns out, Hinata used her Byakugan because she was worried that something happened to Ren when he didn't answer his door. She heard that he returned to the village from his mission injured, so she hurried over to check on him. Once again, the 20 seconds necessary to use his transportation seal screwed Ren over. It took a bit of persuasion, but eventually, Ren managed to make Hinata drop the whole teleportation issue and keep it a secret. At least, for the time being. "Are you really okay?" Hinata asked, concern clear in her voice, as they sat at Ren's kitchen table, eating together the food she brought in her basket. And Ren was very grateful for her thoughtfulness. He didn't fancy going out to eat today. So, having her homemade cooking felt great. But most importantly, he was a bit happy that Hinata cared enough to do this for him. Deep down, it made him feel appreciated. It was nice. "The breaks in your ribs are almost joined, but there are still multiple small fractures," Hinata said with a small frown, looking intently at Ren with her Byakugan. A thought that she was looking at bones within his body passed through Ren's mind and he subconsciously shivered. It was a bit creepy. Seeing him shiver, Hinata misunderstood it. She stood up and took her jacket from her chair before walking toward Ren and caringly putting it over his shoulders as she muttered under her nose, "Stupid Kiri ninjas." With her lips angrily pressed together. Ren gave her an amused smile in return, patting in appreciation her hand that rested on his shoulder. The gesture was adorable, as was her belief that it was Kiri ninjas who ambushed him. Naturally, Ren didn't say in his report that Root attacked him. Firstly, he was not supposed to know about Root. Secret ANBU division meant that even the majority of Jonin in Konoha had no idea about its existence. If he knew about them, it would instantly bring suspicion to him. And secondly, even if he complained to Hokage, there was no proof these ninjas were from Root. He couldn't just say that they wore blank masks, so obviously they belonged to Danzo. Plus their bodies were incinerated by his paper bombs, so their sealed tongues were not available either. Sure, if Ren informed the Hokage about his suspicions and the previous meeting he had with Danzo, the man would probably pay more attention to his wayward friend. But Ren doubted it would have much effect. Sarutobi knew Danzo was a piece of shit. He survived 2 assassination attempts of his, after all. It's not even that Sarutobi can't do anything. He could mobilize his ANBU and kill Danzo and his Root in one day. It's simply that he doesn't want to deal with the political consequences and management issues that would ensue afterward. And if even an attempt at assassinating the Hokage was something Danzo could get away with under Sarutobi's rule, then the attempt at killing Ren would be just laughed out of the room. Maybe even if he had concrete evidence. Without said evidence? Why even bother going through the official channels? This was Konoha. Things didn't work that way over here. Inwardly shaking his head as he enjoyed another spoonful of Hinata's homemade curry, Ren decided to focus on the here and now. He looked at Hinata, who was once again sitting opposite him. "You know, I should really get some books on medical ninjutsu for you. Your Byakugan will give you a very unfair advantage. Most medics have to do their thing by vague feelings from their diagnostic jutsu and experience. But you Hyugas can actually see what you are doing." Ren hummed. Then he remembered that he had promised something along those lines to himself the second Ebisu pushed his tutoring duties onto him. He just really didn't want to deal with having to find a medic amicable enough to give some lessons and lend books on the subject. It was going to be a pain in the ass. So, Ren previously just kept pushing it to his future self. He looked at Hinata and decided to make sure he wouldn't just keep doing that. "Remind me, if I forget, okay? Pester me until I get you the materials if you must. Alright. Hinata seriously nodded and Ren mischievously smiled. Oh, and the curry is delicious. You will make one man very happy when you grow up. He said, trying to lighten the mood. He got his desired result when Hinata's cheeks instantly flushed and she ducked her head. Because of it, Ren only saw her happy smile from under her hair and inwardly smirked, before he remembered his blunder with Naruto, and that made him put a lot of effort into not grimacing on the spot. He would try to explain to the boy why Hinata did not help him with his studies when he met him next. But he would not meddle in their relationship anymore. If there was supposed to be something between them, it would happen even without Ren's meddling. He would probably only screw things up even more if he tried. After a few seconds of awkward silence full of Hinata's eyes staring into her plate, but well, Byakugan so Ren couldn't be sure, she started opening her mouth to say something when the apartment bell suddenly rang, completely dispelling the fluffy atmosphere around. Hinata sprang forth, almost standing up from fright at the sudden sound before falling back onto her chair and making Ren chuckle as he slowly stood up and went to open the door. Hinata just sat in the room, staring wide-eyed at the kitchen door Ren had just exited, trying to calm her racing heart. But then, a moment later, a blonde avalanche burst into the room, widely grinning and dragging the awkward Ren to the kitchen by his wrist. Seeing Hinata, Ino stopped in her tracks and casually waved at her, "Yo, bitch." Hinata's eyes twitched, all the warm and fuzzy feelings she felt were suddenly gone. She narrowed her eyes, "Bimbo." Ren could swear he felt a smidgen of killing intent but it was gone as quickly as it appeared and he couldn't be sure he wasn't just imagining things. "Oh. Free food." Ino happily exclaimed as she led Ren to the chair before ruffling through his cupboards until she found additional cutlery and a plate for herself. She put them on the table, about to get herself a serving from the curry on the table when her eyes found something much more important than food. "Look at you." She huffed and walked behind Ren, completely unaware of Hinata who was still glaring at her. "What are you doing with such messy hair?" She clicked her tongue and pulled a hairbrush from her handbag. "Let me fix it," she said and started trying to tame Ren's bed hair. He could only sit there, completely bewildered and wondering what the hell was going on. Hurricane Ino was something else. "What are you doing here?" Hinata asked in an annoyed tone with pursed lips, throwing Ino an irritated look. But Ino just continued brushing Ren's hair while cluelessly tilting her head. "Hey? The same thing as you. Just checking on my injured teacher," she said in an, "isn't it obvious, day," kind of tone. "Right." Hinata bluntly deadpanned, her fingers briefly twitching, giving Ren a hunch that she wanted to punch Ino in the face. He just sat there, having a vague feeling that he had just missed something important but he couldn't be bothered to think about it right now. Ino was quite good with the brush and the feeling of her fingers on his scalp was very pleasant. He decided to enjoy it while it lasted. Now that he thought about it, he couldn't remember when was the last time somebody gently touched his head. Wasn't that just sad? Ch29. Hinata's future path. "So? What were you two talking about before I showed up?" Ino asked while her fingers and brush still worked on Ren's hair, her grin widening when she saw Hinata blushing and averting her gaze. She was smelling a good rumor and she was ready to pounce. Unfortunately for her, Ren had other plans. "It's good that you came," he spoke, getting the attention of the two girls. "I was thinking about having you two consider what you want to specialize in when it comes to your combat capabilities. We will branch your training once you make up your mind." "What? More training?" Ino whined. "No. We are training enough as is." Hinata quickly changed the topic. Hinata just snorted at her and looked at Ren in curiosity. "What do you think I should specialize in?" Hearing her, Ino huffed and petulantly pouted but also reluctantly spoke. "What she said. Gimme some ideas. Preferably something that will go great with my hair." She gently poked Ren's head with a finger. Rolling his eyes, Ren unsealed 2 chakra papers from the seal on his wrist and put them on the table. "Let's see what chakra nature you two have first, I guess." Hinata reached for one of them but stopped when Ino spoke. "Don't bother. Mine is earth. Dad tested me when I was like 10 or so." She then smirked at Hinata. "How come the Hyuga princess doesn't even know her chakra nature? Practicing elemental ninjutsu is beneath the Hyuga clan." Hinata dismissively said, but her eyes betrayed her excitement as she grabbed one chakra paper and pushed her chakra into it, making it crinkle up. "Lightning, hey? Hat. I am your counter." Ino cheerily grinned at Hinata with an eye smile. Shucks. I can still punch your teeth in. Hinata nonchalantly shrugged, making Ino scowl. Alright Ino, that is enough. Ren patted the girl's wrist, a bit reluctantly signaling her to stop playing with his hair and motioning her to sit behind the table. Thank you. He threw her a grateful and fond smile, making the blonde return it with a barely visible blush as she sat down. Honestly, he didn't know if she did a good job or if his hair looked worse than after being hit by a lightning jutsu. But he didn't care right now. Specialization was a serious business that was going to affect their whole life. Every single ninja in existence specializes in a few things. Itaka had his Mangekyo and Genjutsu. Sasori had his puppets. Orochimaru is a freak of nature. Kisame likes fishy swords. Deidara is a terrorist. Even Sarutobi, the professor, specialized in ninjutsu. Every single notable ninja had a clear skill set containing one or two ninja fields they heavily focused on. This was not something told to kids at the academy. They were supposed to figure it out for themselves, but Ren thought the whole practice stupid. Many genin did not understand this. They tried to learn everything at once, ending up not learning anything at all, or learning many things half-heartedly, which didn't help them much. A person needed direction. Ninja fields were very broad subjects. There was too much to learn, and learning techniques took a lot of time and dedication. It wasn't something where one could just dabble in everything and expect to become strong. That's not how it worked. For example, ninjutsu specialists specialized in ninjutsu, but they also specialized in one, maybe two elements. They could spend their whole lives perfecting their elemental chakra control in said elements and learning corresponding elemental techniques. And most still didn't manage to reach mastery. Even with Byakugan, Ren doubted that Hinata would get to the second stage of lightning exercises before a half-year was up. In the anime, Naruto breezed through most of his training. Tree walking? Week. Raise Nan? Month. Wind chakra control? Was it a week? Or a month? And he got Rasen Shuriken for free out of that deal. Senjutsu? PFF, another month at worst. The kid learned in a month things others needed their whole lifetime to figure out. He was a hacks character through and through. I think Hinata should lean on her Byakugan advantages and specialize in medical and lightning ninjutsu. Ren rubbed his chin. I think I will teach you how to apply exploding seals on weaponry with just your chakra. It shouldn't take long with your Byakugan even if you are a novice at the sealing arts. He continued. He wasn't going to teach her the sealing arts. Her family would definitely not appreciate it. But making her capable of applying one type of seal should be no problem. Her eyes will help immensely in that endeavor too. And then I will have you learn how to throw senbon. You could massively enhance throwing speed and range with lightning chakra, and with your Byakugan, aiming should not be a problem even if the target is kilometers away. That sounds kinda terrifying, to be honest. Hinata admitted, not knowing how to react. It sounded like a very dangerous skill set to have. She honestly never thought about using her Byakugan for long-range attacks. It wasn't something her clan did. But clearly, her teacher had other ideas. It will take a lot of effort and time to make it as good as it sounds. You up for it? Ren asked with a challenging smile, making Hinata bashfully nod. If you do well, I will give you a storage seal like this. Ren pushed chakra into his wrist and made the storage seal tattooed there to appear on his skin, and fill it with senbon. I'd like you to be able to unseal a senbon, apply the exploding seal, apply lightning chakra, and throw it, all within a split second. Now, technically, mastering this would make Hinata a Jonin-level combatant as long as her body was up to par in physical prowess. But the gravity seals would ensure that. Hinata was raised in a ninja household and she understood just how deadly the combo Ren was speaking about could be. A pleased smile appeared on her face as she spoke. You were not joking when you said you were going to help me. She took a deep breath, I will do my best. Of course. Ren nodded, glad she seemed so determined. They had 3 years to make her strong enough that the Hyuga elders would crap their pants just by thinking about putting that slavery seal on her. Ren was going to make it into reality. Hey! What about me? Ino grumpily butted in, and looking at her, Ren remembered the little assignment he gave the girls. Before that, why don't you two show me what is your progress with the hair techniques? He hurriedly changed the topic, inwardly worrying he would again forget if he didn't bring it up now. Not to mention, it gave him a few precious minutes before he had to tell Ino he had no freaking idea what she should specialize in. Well, that was false. He did have ideas. Just nothing as fleshed out as Hinata's future path. And then there was the whole conversation about gravity seals and the requirements to apply them on her, yet, Ren was happy to delay it, even if only for a few more minutes. The girls exchanged challenging looks and Hinata jumped the gun first as her hair suddenly grew, reaching her lower back while the bangs falling around her face reached her stomach. Unfortunately, the bangs previously covering her forehead also grew, now covering her whole face, making Ren laugh at her as she groaned in frustration from behind the curtain of her hair. Well, it's not a problem. It was just a week. You will get better control with more practice. Good job. He tried to comfort her but his snickering was probably not helping. Nor did Ino's unceasing giggling. Scowling, Hinata quickly retracted her hair, ending in the same hairstyle she had before. She clearly practiced getting her hair to its previous state a lot because Ren could not see a difference from before. Giving her a nod of acknowledgement, Hinata grinned as Ren turned to Ino who smugly smirked. Her blonde hair shrunk into a hairstyle reminiscent of Samui as she tried to imitate Hinata's hair. Then Ino took out a rubber ball from her handbag and threw it behind herself. Her hair instantly grew toward it as it became more rigid and sharp, skewering the ball. The tendril of her hair skewering the ball twisted in the air and grew some more, bringing the deflated remainder of the ball back on the table before retracting and becoming silky smooth again. Ino then rearranged her hair into its previous length and had it style itself into a ponytail on its own. She wasn't done showing off as her ponytail grew again and started putting a serving of curry on her plate. Once done, it retracted again and she dug in, innocently looking at Ren with a clear, praise me, expression as she ate. Ren was a bit speechless. The girl had surpassed him when it came to the control of her hair with chakra. He couldn't help but give her applause, which made her expression even more smug as she now condescendingly gazed at the scowling Hinata. But, just this once, Ren let it be. Ino deserved the praise. Author note. Oh my god. I made a mistake. I wonder how many people will notice? Yes, it was pointed out to me that lightning beats earth. So, just take it as Ino being a kid who hadn't graduated from the academy and hadn't trained in elemental jutsu yet. She was just wrong. Happens to the best of us. I would know. Feel free to leave a scathing comment about how this author knows nothing about Narutoverse if you absolutely must. LOL. CH30. Ino's future? No idea. As for you, Ino. Ren spoke after the girls had finished bickering, I have no idea. I smiled at the girl, making her scowl. But before she could open her mouth in protest, Ren continued, you are my student for just a few days so I can't say I have a properly fleshed out idea about what you should specialize in. He tried to mollify her. I guess I will just focus on my clan jutsu for now. Ino unhappily grouched, stabbing her fork into the rice on her plate, playing with her food like a child. Chuckling at how petulant she looked, Ren hummed, I do have some ideas and things I want you to try doing with your clan specialty but I have no idea if your clan practices will allow you to do them. I'll speak to you about them later. Maybe the ideas will help you. He helplessly shrugged. The Yamanaka clan practiced yin energy and mental arts. Ren still remembered that in some stories from his past life, they were depicted as the psychologists of the village. That was not true in this reality, however. The Yamanaka mental jutsu had only one purpose. And that was to attack the victim's mind. They were no mind healers. They trained to understand their opponent's mind, and then control it or destroy it. That didn't mean they could sit people down and give them meaningful advice on how to deal with their trauma or heal mental illnesses. That was pretty much the complete opposite of what they tried to accomplish with their techniques. Worse yet, the concept of mental health was more of a myth than a fact. If asked, most people would just say it is something made up that does not exist. It was just one more thing that hammered down for Ren the fact that this was not the modern times he was part of in his past life. He didn't know when psychology became a serious thing in his past life. But he'd say the people of his current world look at these issues in the same way as the people in his previous life did before psychology became a normal, accepted thing. Ren thought it was a shame. Kakashi was traumatized as fuck. Sasuke had issues due to his family's massacre. Literally over half of the ninja populace had at least one trauma of their own. And at least a tenth of Konoha ninjas were psychopaths. The ninja career was not a very good thing when it came to mental health. There was a reason why so many jonins had a quirk. Why guys shouted about youth, why Kakashi was late to everything and read porn in public, or why Asuma smoked several packs a day. It was simply their coping mechanism. But there was no solution to it, so these problems were put to the side and ignored. The ninjas had to continue working and going on missions. For the greater good of Konoha. Ever wondered why Sasuke was allowed to live alone in his clan compound? Or why he wasn't given therapy? This was the reason. It's not that he is some super ultra genius who can trick Inoichi Yamanaka into believing that he is a completely mentally healthy normal boy after seeing his family and clan massacred by his brother. Nor is it that Konoha higher UPS can't make one not even a 10-year-old child actually go to his therapy sessions. If they had a way to help him become more mentally stable so they wouldn't need to worry about him going off the deep end, the Hokage himself would have carried Sasuke's ass to the therapy. The Uchiha clan bloodline was that important to the village, after all. But they didn't have a way to help. In the same vein, the village did not have the means to help many of their other ninjas become mentally stable. What Ren wanted Ino to try was another thing Yamanaka's did not practice. Ideas he had from reading fanfictions in his past life. For example, Ren knew that Ino could enter her mind like Naruto could enter his seal. The rudimentary exercises Inoichi gave him were a very big clue to that. But did the time pass quicker in her mind? Could she use that to learn things faster? Could she gain perfect recall? The Yamanakas were so hyper-focused on entering the mind of somebody else that they seemed to completely ignore the possibilities of what they could do with their own. But who knows? Maybe Ren's ideas wouldn't pan out. He wasn't Yamanaka and didn't know their mental techniques. He could only give Ino suggestions and wait. He didn't consider that a meaningful help for her development as a kunoichi. I already made you seriously train your body and stop your dieting. I think that's all your father really wanted from me. Ren told Ino, but he could clearly see in her expression that she wasn't liking what she was hearing. He could understand that. He gave Hinata an entire roadmap on how to make her into a badass kunoichi, so it is only natural that Ino would not be satisfied with a half-hearted, "Dunno. Just do more push UPS. Maybe Kenjutsu, but that's not something I could help you with either." Ren admitted. Kenjutsu. Ino looked at Ren as if he had grown a new head. "Me. Swords are cool and it would go great with your hair," Ren jokingly said, repeating what she told him at the start of the conversation. "Besides," Hinata butted in, "it would give you an offensive option that doesn't include trying to scratch your opponent's face with your nails, bimbo. Less broken nails will make you prettier. Sounds like a win-win for you." Ren shot her a small disapproving look at that. He loved her newfound confidence among friends, but right now was not the time to try getting a rise out of Ino. Ino, however, didn't take Hinata's words to heart and reached toward her, scratching her on the hand with her nails, getting a loud, "Hey!" from Hinata. Ren's disapproving look melted into a smile. Mostly because he knew that Hinata had seen the scratch coming from a mile away and had just let Ino do it. "Shut up!" Ino rolled her eyes at Hinata. "Adults are speaking." She sniffed in mock contempt, but Hinata just turned her gaze toward Ino's modest chest. "Adults, She raised her eyebrow at Ino, her lips set in a small innocent smile. Ino instantly scowled and Ren noticed her eyes flicker to Hinata's bust for a second before they narrowed in envy. But instead of throwing another retort at Hinata, she just turned toward Ren. "Why Kenjutsu? Yamanakas need both of their hands for our clan jutsu," she asked, somewhat forcefully as she tried to ignore Hinata. "But your clan jutsu should not be the only skill you will have. You should work on increasing your options." Ren spoke slowly, giving proper thought to his words. "You are nimble. You are also very good with your hands. Hinata has an advantage with Byakugan, but you are not too far behind her when it comes to throwing weapons. Your reaction speed is also amazing for your age." He narrated what he had noticed about her during her training. Ino was certainly going to be a speed-based fighter. She was lean, flexible, and with proper training, she would be very fast. Her body was not built for strength, however. Ren wondered if that was due to some deficiency of Yang Chakra or something, since every Yamanaka he had seen was similar to Ino in this regard. He inwardly shook his head to clear his thoughts. That didn't matter right now. He considered what he could do with her natural inclination toward speed. It would have been great if she could be like Sasuke, but her earth nature threw a wrench into that dream. But as a speed-based fighter, it would still be better for her to master some kind of weapon. She was young now, had a jonin as a father who could easily get her skilled tutors, and had a lot of free time. It was the best time for her to start learning a new skill. "I guess I'll pester Dad to get me some Kenjutsu lessons." Ino agreed, but it was obvious she was still doubtful. But Ren just helplessly shrugged, training to get faster and learning a sword can make you dangerous. Especially if you pair them with the hair jutsu you just learned. You can get close to your opponent, slash at him with your sword, which he will definitely evade, only to be skewered by a tendril of your hair. He described an example of how that skill set could be used. Honestly, the speed at which she mastered the hair jutsu made Ren wonder if ninjutsu wasn't the best direction for her. But Yamanaka's did not have overly great chakra reserves, that would make his work as her tutor much harder. Hearing Ren, Ino grimaced in disgust. Shoi! Getting blood out of my hair will definitely be a great experience. She grumpily complained as she crossed her arms over her chest. But her tense shoulders relaxed at getting at least some direction. Alright. I guess it can work for now. But you better come up with something more. She gave Ren a look similar to an angry chihuahua. At this rate, Sasuke will get far more interested in Hinata than me. Ren just rolled his eyes while Hinata snorted. You will need far more than that if you want to keep up with me. Hinata said, giving Ren a questioning look, silently asking him a question. He sighed and nodded at her. He appreciated that she kept the gravity seals a secret. But yes, he didn't want Ino to feel neglected later on when she inevitably discovered their existence, so he was going to give them to her too. Still, he was reluctant to breach the subject. What's that supposed to mean? Ino exclaimed, affronted, probably misunderstanding something. But Ren wasn't going to wonder what went on in the head of that lovesick girl. Realizing he probably wouldn't get a better opportunity, he decided to bite the bullet. She is talking about gravity seals. With another sigh, Ren started the lengthy explanation. As my student, I am willing to give them to you, but... The conversation about them started from there. It was long, difficult, and embarrassing. The only saving grace was that Ino was a clan kid and understood the secrecy around personal techniques. Now Ren just needed to have a similar conversation with her father because he'd rather not paint a seal on his baby girl without his permission. And boy, was he not looking forward to explaining the circumstances to Ino's overprotective father. Ch31. Warning. It was the third day since Ren returned to Konoha and he was currently at his home in the capital of the Land of Fire, standing next to his kitchen table with a shadow clone standing on the other side of the table as they both focused their chakra on a seal spread on a massive scroll on the table. It was finally the time for him to take a small revenge on Danzo, but Ren had a very hard time keeping his focus. Everything was ready. The seals were in place. The opportunity was here. Danzo had a small meeting with some of his men in one of his underground bunkers. Ren had another shadow clone sitting at the Yakiniku-Q restaurant with Hinata for the alibi. He used it to teach her the basics of theory for his exploding seals to not waste time too. And yet, Ren just couldn't help but mentally come back to the conversation with Inoichi about Ino and giving her the gravity seals that happened yesterday. He expected Inoichi to go into his overprotective dragon dad mode and start spewing flame left and right in righteous parental fury, chasing Ren out of his house with a broom. Or something. But Inoichi? He was like, "Oh, you need my daughter naked to apply your seal? Who cares, PSSY. Get on with it." Of course, the man didn't say it in these exact words, but the look he had given Ren. It told Ren exactly what Inoichi was thinking at that moment. Ren had forgotten what the Yamanaka clan's specialty was. Or rather, he just didn't do the obvious mental jump to connect the dots. The Yamanakas were predominantly information gatherers. And it was an awkward topic, but seduction missions were a big part of that. Yamanakas could do seduction missions without the whole gotta sleep with the target to get him to spill the secret thing. With their mind techniques, they just needed to get the target alone in a room and knock him or her out with poison. Their clan jutsu would do the rest. They still needed to do the seducing part of the mission to get the target alone, though. That's why their clan trained the kids from early on, molding them not to be some quivering shy mess. Ren realized this was the reason why Ino took the whole explanation about the gravity seals so well. He was all blushy and awkwardly embarrassed when he was explaining it to her while she just sat there, cool as a cucumber, and gave him a smile full of amusement. Ren's eyes twitched when he remembered all her questions and how awkward they made him feel. She was probably having a blast teasing him. Inoichi was grateful too. He realized what a boon the seals would be for Ino, and much to Ren's exasperation, the fact he could not give Ren anything in return because the other Yamanaka jutsu were a clan secret made the man actually embarrassed. Honestly, Ren had a hard time comprehending the clan's mentality. If it wasn't some slavery bullshit and unhealthy focus on traditions, then it was preparing kids for seduction missions from a young age. or teaching kids to try to eat their way to an early grave before reaching mid-teens, or having kids live like dogs to bring out their instincts to the surface. And let's not even start with Aberramies. Those are better forgotten because no, their bodies did not naturally contain the space for their bugs. That was artificially created during their childhood. It was no wonder they all seemed repressed. And they say Naras are weird. Really, the lazy slackers were actually pretty chill about the training their kids received. They made them play shogi and tend to the deer. Shaking his head to focus on the current issue, Ren focused on the seal and instantly got a mental image of a dark room with Danzo sitting behind a table. From the angle, Ren could tell that the seal was placed on one of Danzo's operatives who were currently kneeling in front of him, probably receiving orders. Unfortunately, Ren hadn't yet figured out how to add audio to his spying seal. Getting visuals was hard enough as it was. But if Gaara could make a functioning eye out of freaking sand, then there was no way Ren could not make a seal transmit vision. Looking around, Ren didn't see Sai and released a relieved sigh. He didn't want to butterfly Ino's future boyfriend out of existence. But he wouldn't stop his plan for the pale kid if he was here. Having an opportunity like this would be hard to get again. Danzo had around 30 of his operatives in the room with him. Ren doubted that happened often. Contrary to popular belief, Danzo did not have an entire army of ninjas. If he did, he wouldn't need to be so sneaky with his moves. The man had around 100 ninjas under his employ, but the number was always fluctuating. On one hand, training a competent ninja was hard and took years. Many didn't make it to the end of Danzo's training. On the other, with the missions Danzo had his subordinates do, they tended to die pretty often. The old cripple actually did almost back-breaking work for Konoha's safety. Well, his little slaves did. But that was beside the point. What they were doing wasn't nice. Danzo's methods were appalling and he was a total scum. But he got results. IWA was growing too strong? Root sabotaged them. Kumo was testing a new weapon? Root sabotaged them. Kiri's civil war was drawing to a conclusion? Root. Well, that's how it went. Root was fanning the flames of conflict in other countries, just so that Konoha stayed safe with a spotless reputation. Of course, there could be an entire debate about the need for Root's existence. They didn't do anything different from what the assassination squads of actual ANBU did. Technically, they did not need to exist. After all, their purpose was already being fulfilled by the ANBU. Then again, maybe Ren was missing something? Oh, well, it's not as if it mattered right now. With a sad sigh and a smattering of guilt, Ren triggered a specific part of the seal on the table. Instantly, several of the 30 kneeling men started having angrily glowing red seals spread throughout their bodies. Panic suddenly spread through the room and Danzo hastily stood up from his chair with wide eyes. The visual feed from Ren's seal abruptly cut off as Ren's exploding seals went off. Back in Konoha, the entire village suddenly shook as if hit by a powerful earthquake. Ren's shadow clone had to catch Hinata to prevent her from falling from her seat. It was as if the ground heaved several times. Well, that explains where Danzo's bunker is located, I guess. Ren's clone thought to himself with a small chuckle. Apparently, it was directly under Konoha, and making the exploding seals use the victim's chakra to overcharge themselves before exploding had an unexpectedly noticeable effect. Back in Ren's house in the capital, Ren took a cup of hot chocolate and took a sip in celebration. The job was done. He worked at the barrier core. He knew the layout of the seals protecting most secret entrances to Konoha. Doing this wasn't even hard since he was one of the guys usually doing the maintenance on these seals. All he had to do was have a clone attach a hidden mix of exploding and spying seals to the security seals on the entrances and have his seals latch onto anybody with a certain feature as they put their hand on a security seal on the entrance to pass through. Thankfully, there was nobody other than Danzo's cronies crazy enough to apply a seal to their tongue. Ren used that as an identifier. Everybody with that feature passing through the entrances became Ren's eyes thanks to his spying seals, and eventually, they would be his instrument of terror by becoming unknowing suicide bombers. Ren's additions to the secret entrances were only there for 2 days, and even then, he was already a bit nervous that they would be noticed. Because of that, Ren only managed to infect around 12 root operatives with his seals before he had his clone take them down. 8 of these operatives were in that room with Danzo. Ren hated doing this. Cosplaying as a terrorist was not his thing. But he was just one guy. One fresh chunin with near zero influence. Danzo was the village elder with tens of jonin and chunin subordinates wholly loyal to him. He was the guy with connections to the daimyo court and several nobles. the guy who had many wealthy merchants in his pocket. Fighting fairly was never an option for Ren. But still, pissing off a Sealmaster who had almost complete knowledge of the seal network of the village was a very stupid thing to do. Fortunately, Danzo had no idea Ren was this skilled with seals. He would probably suspect, but there would be nothing pointing at Ren, and he kind of hoped Danzo would think this was far beyond the capabilities of a fresh Chunin from the barrier core too. Because he had no delusions. Danzo was not dead. At best, he had wasted one Sharingan for resurrection. However, several of his high-end subordinates died, and that will undoubtedly deal a massive blow to Danzo's organization. He will probably need months, if not years, to recuperate his losses. It will give Ren precious time to get stronger and make more seals for self-protection. The next time Danzo sent assassins after him, he would be more than ready. This was unfortunately just a warning shot. Ch32. Danzo's dismay. Danzo Shimura sat in his office in his house, impassively looking at some documents with a composed poise. But inwardly, he was brooding. The attack on the root base yesterday was a disaster. He had lost 39 ninjas. Worse yet, since the attack hit the core of his base, among these 39 were some of his most capable subordinates. He will need at least 2 years to train their replacements to a similar level. The only saving grace in this ordeal was that Torun and Fu were on a mission, so they were not present during the meeting. Danzo had to admit that whoever attacked him was good. They managed to kill him too. And that made Danzo even more furious. Unlike capable well-trained ninja subordinates, Sharingan was a limited resource. And Danzo did not lose just one, but 2 of them yesterday. Without even seeing the shadow of his opponent. He still had no idea who was responsible too. It was maddening. Restraining the urge to throw his coffee mug at the wall, Danzo took a subtle calming breath. Just remembering how he barely managed to cast Izanagi in time before the explosions ripped his body apart, only for the ceiling to collapse on top of him 5 seconds after he resurrected, wasting yet another Sharingan, was enough to make him furious. But he was a ninja, and letting himself be driven by his emotions was unbecoming. He was stronger than that. After the incident, when Danzo finally managed to dig himself out of the rubble of his previous base, he couldn't even rest. The village was put under a state of emergency, and Danzo was called for a council meeting the second he reached his home. He remembered he sat there, in the council room, frustrated as he listened to Hiruzen and his council going through the damage report and deciding how to deal with the natural disaster that hit Konoha. He couldn't even tell Hiruzen he was attacked, because Root was supposed to be disbanded. He couldn't even twitch in a wrong way because Hiruzen didn't become the Hokage by sheer dumb luck. Danzo knew his old friend was watching him like a hawk throughout the entire meeting. He probably suspected something. He was not stupid. Just old and too weary to act on his suspicions because he didn't want to deal with the outcome. Something Danzo used for all it was worth over the years. The meeting was a very uncomfortable few hours, and the fact he had to go through such an experience after living through his death 2 times did not help Danzo's sour mood at all. So, these are the most likely suspects. Danzo said, his voice carrying just the lightest touch of anger as he looked at the documents on his table. There were photos of several ninjas and info on them. Orochimaru, Jiraiya. He started reading the names, mentally going through the reasons why each individual would attack him. Many had a reason. But only a few had the means and skill to do something like this. After an hour and a half of going through the files, Danzo's eyes fell on a certain document and he frowned as he took it into his hands. Ren. The Chunin from the barrier core. He drummed his finger on the table, deep in thought. No. He probably wouldn't have the necessary skill for something like this. Danzo muttered with a frown. It was suspicious. After their meeting and Ren's subsequent rejection of his offer, Danzo sent one of his best assassination teams to deal with the problem. It was just a lucky coincidence that this team had a mission in the Land of Waves with the goal of killing the commander of the Kiri outpost over there. Ren was nothing but an unimportant side objective. Something they should have dealt with in 10 minutes before moving on to their main mission. The Chunin was just unlucky that he got the mission in the general direction Danzo's best assassins headed. He was simply at the wrong time at the wrong place. Disposing of him wasn't supposed to be a problem. And yet, it was. Danzo lost his best assassination team and Ren survived. The main mission his subordinates embarked on was not fulfilled, allowing the Kiri ninjas to gain even more ground in the Land of Waves. All in all, it was a total disaster. A textbook failure. The official report stated something about his subordinates being luckily caught in a massive amount of exploding tags, making Danzo's suspicions deepen even more. Things like that sometimes happen. Danzo refrained from touching his supposedly missing eye. He too shouldn't have survived the battle where he lost it. He just got lucky. He could believe that Ren got lucky too. But he still could not shake off the suspicious feeling the whole thing evoked in him. Because if somebody had the motive to act against him, it would definitely be the man he had ordered killed. The attack was done through seals too, and Ren was in the barrier core. But he was just a chunin. He was a ninja for barely a year and did not show any special aptitude so far. He did not invent any groundbreaking seal, just introduced some small innovations to several seals, earning his promotion to chunin rank. He seemed to be a bit above average, not somebody capable of bombing the base of a secret military organization that he should not know existed. The more Danzo thought about it, the bigger headache he had. Ren would have to be killed. Eventually. If for nothing else, then for managing to survive the last attempt on his life and killing his best assassination team. The whole timing of the attack was very dubious. Danzo's guts were telling him Ren was suspicious, but his mind was having a hard time coming up with a way a 17-year-old average ninja could manage to pull that attack off. Danzo had seen many geniuses over the years. But not many could have done that after being a ninja for 1 year. The perpetrator managed to plant explosive seals on his subordinates without their knowledge. Without them noticing anything suspicious. Jonins had no clue they had been made into carriers for explosives. It honestly baffled Danzo. He had no idea how that was even possible. There were many surprising and seemingly impossible things in the world. Kids stronger than Jonins existed. There were many of those. If somebody told Danzo that Ren was strong enough to face off against his 6 Jonins head-on, he would find it hard to believe, but he could accept it. Stranger things happened in the world. But a kid managing to plant lethal seals on several Jonins without them noticing a thing? Was this Ren supposed to be the second coming of the 4th Hokage or something? Not even Minato was this good at sealing arts at that age, and he had help from Uzumaki Kushina during his studies of the arts. No. Danzo didn't believe it possible that Ren could be behind the attack. Hiruzen, Orochimaru, Jiraiya, or some other S-rank ninja perhaps. They had the necessary skill in the sealing arts and the wealth of experience necessary to discover the base and plant the seals. But would they be so subtle about it? Hiruzen was old, Jiraiya was a buffoon, and Orochimaru would boast at the first opportunity. Danzo pursed his lips. He couldn't determine anything from the information he had at hand. Still. Have him followed. He looked at his subordinate who was patiently waiting in the shadows of the corner and pointed at Ren's file. I want to know everything he does. There was still a possibility that Ren was connected with the bombing. Maybe he was a spy for Orochimaru or some other village. Or maybe he wasn't. But Danzo didn't get to where he was by ignoring his gut feelings. It was better to be safe than sorry. Yes, Lord Danzo. The masked ninja replied and vanished into the shadows. With a frown still present on his face, Danzo put the file with Ren's ninja information back onto the table, his eyes intently watching Ren's registration photo as if trying to discover some secret he was missing. Sighing, Danzo moved his gaze to the next file belonging to another suspect. He still had an entire stack of files on his table that he would have to go through and hopefully identify the most likely suspect. He was starting to see why Hiruzen hated paperwork so much. CH33. Capital City. Ren strolled through the streets of the capital city, happily humming under his nose as he observed his surroundings. So many different people walked the streets. It was quite fascinating. Looking to his right, Ren could see 2 samurai patrolling the streets and glaring at some yakuza-looking guys who skulked back into back alleys under the samurai's gazes. The whole street was full of common people of all kinds. Street vendors advertising their wares, street urchins looking for a good target for theft, common people from the city flooding the streets, and country bumpkin peasants who were gawking at everything much like Ren but in a much less subtle fashion. It was very lively. Here and there, Ren could even see ninjas. For example, further along the street, standing in a line for a yakitori stand were 4 people chatting with each other. 3 16-year-old teenagers and 1 woman in her early 30s. Ren momentarily stopped and furrowed his eyebrows as he observed the genin team from Konoha. He didn't recognize these people even though they were the same age as him. They were probably from a different class. It made him relieved. His only disguise was civilian clothes, so meeting somebody from Konoha who knew his face would be extremely awkward and unlucky. Such a thing was not likely to happen because Konoha was quite a big city. But the risk still existed. Ren didn't exactly have permission to be here, after all. But what is a little treason before lunchtime? He hoped this mindset would not come to kick him in the ass one day. But telling ninjas apart in a crowd was not that hard. At least if they were on an official assignment. There was the forehead protector, but even then, if a ninja took it off, they rarely changed their footwear. Ren only needed to look at their feet and check if they had blue sandals on. It always tripped Ren up. Why sandals? Wouldn't steel-tipped shoes be better? But once he started practicing with chakra, he understood. They were very convenient. Due to the open parts, it was much easier to use chakra with them. The feet were already the hardest place to focus chakra into. Trying to push it through the boots to stick on a tree or walk on water would just add another layer of difficulty for somebody learning how to do these things. A layer that didn't need to be there this early in their training. Sandals were kind of like a crutch to make it easier on the kids, and because they had to wear it literally for years during their childhood and learning phase, ninjas were usually too used to them and stuck with them for life. Frankly, the sandal makers were probably drowning in money in Konoha. Of course, ninjas were not stupid. If they were on a secret mission or were doing something where disguise and stealth were necessary, they would take the sandals off. Once experienced enough, it didn't really matter if they wore sandals or boots or whatever other kind of shoes. They could use the chakra anyway, so they could disguise themselves properly. Ren had a detection seal in his pocket and it was pinging him quite often. It only did so when detecting genin and up levels of chakra. And this whole city was surprisingly full of people who fell into that category. From time to time, when Ren paid proper attention to observing his surroundings, he could see people hiding in the shadows, or standing on rooftops just for a second before disappearing, or feel a very observant gaze pass him in the crowd, which made his instincts flare. Clearly, the capital city was not as simple as it looked at first glance. Ren was glad he didn't go for some elaborate disguise. That would probably get him the attention of all these eyes in the shadows. He really didn't need that. It was a less-known fact among the young people in Konoha, but the Konoha ninjas were not the only ninja force in the country. They didn't teach this at the academy. In fact, weirdly enough, they didn't teach much about other forces outside of ninja villages at the academy. It was all Konoha is glorious this, or serving the village is an honor that. Or other villages are the creation of the devil. Burn them with the will of fire. They washed them brains well. But then again, they had decades of experience. From what Ren remembered, the only thing about other forces the academy teachers told the kiddies was that they should not antagonize samurai. There were other ninja clans who did not join Konoha after its creation. Clans that were already sworn in service to this or that noble family for life couldn't just tell their lords toodles and leave. They were usually small clans and their only mission in life was to protect and work for their lord, but there were quite a lot of them all over the country. The daimyo also had ninja clans under his command. Several of them. And as the daimyo, he had the necessary resources to help them in their ninja training. His ninjas were no pushovers. Ren wouldn't be surprised if the daimyo had 1 or 2 S-rank ninjas somewhere in his pocket. His ninjas didn't do mercenary work like Konoha ninjas did. They focused on protecting the capital city and the daimyo family. And since the daimyo stayed in the capital most of the time, these ninjas were pretty much irrelevant outside of this city. Maybe that's why the academy instructors did not teach the children about them? Ren frowned at that thought as he reached his goal, a small restaurant where he was having a meeting with a merchant in like 5 minutes ago. Ren jolted as he realized he spent so much time gawking at the city and its people that he was late. With a wry smile, he entered the restaurant and was led to a booth with a ginger-haired man, a true rarity in this world, who gave him a grumpy, almost Irish-looking scowl upon seeing him. Nevertheless, the man stood up and slightly bowed before starting his introduction. "I am Ren Ishii, the head of the Ishiren Trading Company. You wanted to present me a lucrative product?" he impatiently asked, quoting what Ren wrote in his letter to the man. Ren just smiled, slightly apologetically at being late. "Yes. My name is Ren." His lips almost twitched into a smile. But that would only infuriate the man more, so he refrained. The man's name was one of the reasons he chose his trading company for this. It was a good cover for him. If he struck it rich with the products he was going to introduce, the company could just say that Ren made it and most people would conveniently misunderstand which Ren. After all, being an orphan without a last name had its advantages. Especially since there were thousands of Rens in this world. Ren had to make use of it at least in some fashion, no? "Go on, then. Wow me." The merchant Ren snorted and crossed his hands across his chest. Despite his acting, Ren could clearly see that the man was properly evaluating him with his eyes. And considering that Ren went for an inconspicuous civilian look, the merchant was probably not very impressed. My business with you has to do with. Ren sat down, and used a dramatic pause in his speech as he put a scroll with drawings on the table, board games. Well, he had to start somewhere. If Jiraiya could get money by writing porn, Ren could exploit the kids and leverage his knowledge of board games from his previous life to earn himself a fortune. This world was seriously lacking in fun things to do for kids. Sure, that Hikaru kid from the movies had even a gaming console. But that was only something the richest could afford at this time. It was not widespread by any means. There were some card games and board games. But they mostly had to do with gambling, not something parents wanted their kids to learn. Usually, kids learn crafts, work in fields, or focus on their studies in this world. It depended on what social class and place one was born in. Cheap games that even normal people could afford were definitely something that could sell well in Ren's opinion. Sure, he would love to bring something more important into this world. Like new alcoholic beverages. Or a steam engine. Or, okay, his mind was drawing blanks. The problem was that he had no idea how to make beverages or how to construct the steam engine. But board games and card games? He remembered some of them. Some that this world did not have. He decided he could start with these. Ren was already keeping most of his money in a storage scroll. But it would be nice to have a proper legal account with legal money that could be traced back and wasn't tied to Konoha. This was just one of his contingencies in case he needed to leg it out of Konoha. The merchant, Ren Ishii, threw Ren a skeptical look, but since he was already here, he sighed and decided to take a look at the drawings. Ren could just tell. This was the beginning of a beautiful mutually beneficial relationship. And if it didn't work? Well, he could always go the Jiraiya route and write some smut. After all, how hard could that be? Ch34. Clone Kun. While Ren was negotiating the cooperation between him and the Ishiren Trading Company in the capital, his clone, who liked to refer to himself as Clone Kun, spent his time doing the usual activities Ren partook in his daily life. It had already been a week since Ren left for the capital, and Clone Kun had to say, he envied the bastard for avoiding all this trouble he had to go through in Konoha. Ever since the earthquake, Konoha has been on its head. The village was in a state of emergency, a strict curfew was imposed, and worst of all, Clone Kun knew he was being followed. It was a stressful few days for him. Just yesterday, a ninja tried to break into his apartment. They failed because Ren had a lot of security seals installed. The ninja tripped up an alarm seal and got caught in a security seal that glued his sandals to the floor. Clone Kun almost confronted him out of habit. He heard the alarm seal and his first instinct was to check it out. He only barely managed to stop himself before reaching the trapped ninja who was just around the corner. Then again, he did just wake up due to the seal, so he was still a bit groggy from the sleep. Besides, who wakes up a clone by trying to break into the original's property? Clone Kun was certain that it was against the clone rights or something. He deserved a proper 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep, damn it. Fortunately, he didn't confront the ninja. He pretended that something else got his attention and waited around said corner until he didn't hear the guy trying to struggle out of the trap anymore. The problem was that while Danzo's men were definitely following him, they didn't seem to be aggressive just yet. They seemed to look for information more than anything, and that told him they had no idea he was behind the explosive surprise that turned Konoha upside down last week. That was great. He could deal with a bit of suspicion. He just had to act like usual. But if he saw the ninja who tried to break into his house, the man would either try to kill him or try to kill himself on the spot. The first option would be very troublesome because Clone Kun was just a clone, and even if he had won the fight, it would make Danzo more suspicious of Ren. The second opinion was also troublesome because people were liable to notice a fight between ninjas in the middle of the village's housing district, so he would have to report it and explain what happened. People would start asking questions like, why does he have such strong security in his home? Does he not trust Konoha, or worse, why would somebody want to break into his house? Yeah, the Clone Kun decided to just not do that. The best trouble is one you can easily evade, after all. Just like now. He was sitting under a tree like he did during most of Ino and Hinata's training sessions. In his hands, he held a book reminiscent of his Fuinjutsu notebook, but it wasn't his Fuinjutsu notebook. The reason? Because the detection seal he had on his person was telling him that his observer was getting unusually boldly clingy today. They risked getting far too close. In fact, they were crouching in the branches of the tree above his head. At first, Clone Kun was tense, thinking this was it. That they would try to kill him and then Ren would be unhappy because he would need to leave Konoha and then he would need to deal with hunter ninjas which would be just awful and he would need to look for a way to steer the future without being in Konoha and the Clone Kun forcefully stopped his train of depressing thoughts. He was probably created with a small flaw. Such a depressing mental monologue was not Ren's usual thing but it happened to him quite often. It was annoying. Nevertheless, Clone Kun realized after an hour that the goal of the attempted break-in into his house and the risk of getting too close during this peek abo operation was to see what was in his Fuinjutsu notebook. The chakra of his hidden observer slightly moved only when he pulled a similar little book out. It wasn't hard to guess his goal once Clone Kun noticed that fact. Of course, Ren's Fuinjutsu designs were the most important thing to him. He wouldn't be pulling his notebook when he was aware that a ninja was practically watching over his shoulder. It honestly amazed Clone Kun that his observer thought he wasn't noticed. But he guessed Ren's reputation as a fresh chunin was helping him out here. Instead, he brought out an empty notebook and started drawing. And he was miserable when it came to drawing. Stick figures were the height of his skill in that department. But since Danzo was so interested in what Ren did with his book all the time, Clone Kun was eager to entertain his observer, drawing a manga with stick figures and appropriately throwing cringy lines here and there. He had to admit, doing the SX scene with stick figures was hard. But Clone Kun just wanted to see if his observer would react. Alas, the man was probably emotionally dead inside. He didn't even twitch. Not even when Ren made the male stick figure miss an arm and an eye in a similar fashion to Danzo and had the female figure wear a big red hat. A bit risky? Maybe. But he was one frustrated clone. Because of Ren's constant observer, Hinata and Ino's training had to take one for the team. Clone Kun wanted to start Hinata on the elemental training and have Ino learn some earth techniques to see how fast she could learn ninjutsu and determine if she had a talent in that area. But of course, Ren was just a tutor who was supposed to help the girls with their academy stuff. Elemental training and techniques were chunin level things. It's not something that academy students should learn. Ren didn't care about unwritten rules like these. These girls will find themselves in a war before they reach 20. But if Danzo knew that Ren was teaching them advanced things, he could try making some trouble for him. It wouldn't be much but the man would probably try it just to be petty or to see Ren's reaction. So, unfortunately, Hinata was relegated to something much less interesting than learning how to shoot lightning from the tips of her fingers. But it was also something she still needed to learn anyway. She was learning how to throw senbon for now. Ino was doing an increased amount of physical exercises to lessen the gap between Hinata's and her level when it came to her fitness now that she had her gravity seals. Other than that, Ren had her practice water walking or do the katas with her sword. Both things were very beneficial and maybe even necessary for her future career as a kunoichi, but also equally boring to watch. Seeing her fall into the pond stopped being funny when it happened for the 41st time. Her father pulled through for her and got her Gecko Heihei to show her the Kenjutsu basics. Heihei was not going to be Ino's teacher, though. And Clone Kun was not surprised. Heihei was the best Kenjutsu user in Konoha. It was astonishing that Inoichi could get him to teach Ino anything at all. The man was horribly busy. Then again, the older Yamanaka probably had his methods. Blackmail and bribery were not out of the question considering Ren's experience with the overprotective man. Heihei was just going to check Ino's progress with the sword every 2 weeks and give her some tips. Neither senbon throwing nor kenjutsu were skills that could be learned overnight. The Akugan would help Hinata a bit. But she still needed to grind the hours of the learning process to get the skill into her hands. In the anime, everybody could throw a kunao but people generally disregarded the fact that throwing a kunao was not easy. The kids trained for years in the academy before they got that skill down. Senbon was very different from kunao, however. Clone Kun reckoned Hinata would need at least a few months to gain the needed proficiency with senbon. Ino wasn't particularly talented at kenjutsu but she was stubborn and one of Ren's ideas when it came to Yamanaka clan practices actually worked. Ino could enter her mind and learn stuff there at an accelerated pace. The blonde girl was so giddy about it and she looked downright adorable when she glared at Ren with her hands on her hips and had him swear to not tell that to her father or any other Yamanaka. She wanted it for only herself. She could be selfish like that sometimes. Honestly, how that worked, Ren had no idea. He thought she would use it to learn book stuff. But apparently, Ino didn't get the memo because she told him she was practicing the hair techniques in her kenjutsu in her mental space. And much to Clone Kun's shock, it did work for her. She was learning the Kenjutsu basics at lightning speed and her slashes were getting more and more precise every day. How she could replicate chakra in her mind or how did she know when she did a technique correctly, neither Clone-kun nor Ren had any idea. But he wasn't going to mention that to the girl. She most likely had no idea either. She probably just didn't think about it. She was doing something outrageous but it worked out for her. And it would give her the advantage in a similar fashion as the Bakugan gave Hinata. Ren didn't know enough about Yin Chakra to put together how Ino's new mental skill worked. But then again, Chakra could even resurrect the dead and allow people to travel through space and time. He still had a lot to learn. Ino was probably just too thick to realize this was not supposed to be possible and that's why she managed to do it. Sigh, the blondes in this world. The situation kind of worked itself out despite the consequences of Ren's actions. The girls would need the time to master their new skills and Danzo's minions wouldn't learn anything sensitive by watching them practice senbon throwing and kenjutsu. But god if it wasn't boring to watch the girls throw senbon or slash a sword at the air. Clone-kun couldn't wait for Ren to return from the capital so he could peacefully disperse into the air. Living was too depressing. Ch35. You are weird. Ren came back from the capital 2 weeks after the earthquake and things were finally winding down in the village. He got a stink eye from his clone who had to suffer through the crisis but his suffering was for the greater good so it didn't count. Usually, he wouldn't be able to keep a clone summoned for 2 weeks straight. However, his existence was not only for Ren to evade the possibility of Danzo deciding to deal with him in a more permanent fashion. The more important reason was to test Ren's new seals. The durability seal was something Ren worked on even before he got his hands on shadow clones. And when he finally managed to create something that worked, it turned out the seal also had an unexpected effect. It kept the chakra contained within the shell of the clone, lengthening its lifespan by a lot. Ren wanted to see if the clone would last for a few days but he was surprised that 2 weeks later, the clone was still going strong. Normally, chakra leaks in a small amount from shadow clones at all times. They would run out of chakra in less than a day even if they don't use any technique. Anime didn't show this aspect very well and Ren understood why. Naruto was a cheater. Ren's bet was that his chakra was so powerful that this was not much of an issue for him. His clones could go for days. Normal ninjas, even Jonin, were not so lucky. Sometimes Ren just wanted to gently put his hands around that little overpowered brat's neck and ahem, he was joking, of course. He meant to say he felt very slightly envious. Yes. That was it. Because of his clone's new longevity, Ren had to make another seal. He approached the clone and chuckled, "You don't seem like you enjoyed your time here. Anything important to tell me? You know, since I won't get your memories and stuff," he said as he fished out a paper tag with the other experimental seal. "Sure," the clone shrugged and gave Ren a deadpan look, "Get fucked." Ren almost choked on his spit when he heard that. Then again, that also meant there was nothing important to report so all was well. Leaving me here with Danzo's flunky following me like an overeager stalker was so not cool. The clone muttered and Ren threw him a wry look. He knew it was not fun. That's why he delayed his homecoming as much as possible. Day. The clone did seem a bit frustrated and Ren wondered if it had to do with keeping him in existence for an extended period of time. Clones were not meant to exist for days on end and there was no documentation of the effects of it happening. This was practically uncharted waters for Ren. Every little detail could be important. "That's the new seal?" the clone asked, pulling Ren out of his thoughts. "Yup." Ren nodded and handed the paper tag to the clone. At the end of the day, the clone was still him so he too was a Sealmaster and probably understood bits and pieces of the seal since it was done in Ren's usual sealing style. "It's nice work." The clone praised with a nod, smiling a bit for the first time since Ren met him today and his eyes gained an interested gleam. "What did you name it?" If Ren needed any confirmation that this was his clone, the look in his eyes when seals were mentioned was enough of a proof. "Yin Containment Seal." Ren proudly replied. He tried to keep the name simple while also making it describe what the seal was supposed to do. "Ha!" The clone apparently disagreed, judging by that sound. "Are you mad? It sounds like something out of a cheap cultivator story." "Oh, who am I kidding? Of course, you are mad." He huffed and put the tag with the seal on the table before he crossed his arms on his chest, giving Ren a stern look. Ren couldn't help but think that having himself stare at him in this way was seriously weird. "If you are going to do it, then do it properly. At least call it 9 evil sealing yin containing dragon lock turtle tiger phoenix. Insert a mythical animal of your preference. Super profound seal. The clone had to take a deep breath at the end of that sentence. Ren owlishly blinked at himself, and for a moment he wondered what was wrong with him. Because deep down, his thoughts subconsciously agreed with the clone before he managed to shake them off. No, no, no. No way. Yin Containment Seal was a great name. Ignoring that little inner turmoil, Ren politely smiled at his clone, but in the corners of his mouth his smile was visibly a bit strained. You are weird. The clone instantly noticed it and chuckled. I am you. He shrugged and Ren rolled his eyes at him. Hey you, nice to meet you. I am embarrassed. He retorted with a grin. Dad jokes? Really? The clone raised an unamused eyebrow at Ren, making his grin disappear. Am I usually that uncool? No wonder Naruto calls us uncle. I am embarrassed too. And Ren slightly flushed. Why was he inflicting self-burn on himself again? Okay. He had to admit that joke was awkward. But it just came out of his mouth before he could think about it. That little vacation did you a world of good. I am glad. The clone said in a relieved voice, all remaining tension leaving from his shoulders. It sure did. Ren agreed, his embarrassment melting away. Hell, he couldn't remember the last time he was this carefree. He will have to take vacations outside Konoha more often. Staying in this village was clearly not doing him any good. It wasn't just the village either. This entire world was just way too stressful. Humming to himself, the clone saw that he was no longer needed here, so he once again took the sealing tag. Let's get this over with. He said, and before Ren could react, the clone slapped the tag on his forehead, making Ren instantly freeze. For a moment, Ren braced himself for an impact. 2 weeks of memories should definitely knock him out. Especially if he wasn't prepared for them. But fortunately, the yin containment seal worked as intended and Ren relaxed when he received no memories from his clone. The purpose of the seal was to catch and contain the yin chakra leaving the clone, which usually returned to the caster, bringing with it the clone's memories. Naturally, Ren didn't have the time to test it. The abrupt actions of his clone made Ren wonder if he wasn't growing a tad bit too reckless. But that couldn't be it, could it? Oh, well, it was probably Ino's fault. Hinata was too meek to corrupt him, and having a natural mindfucker as a student was a very convenient excuse. Ren nodded to himself, deciding he should give Ino 10 additional laps around the pond tomorrow. Teacher's privileges. Maybe he could test if his new seal could counter the Yamanaka techniques? Ren shook that thought off almost as soon as it appeared in his head. It was a good idea, but testing it was just too dangerous. He didn't want Ino's spirit to be trapped within a seal. Explaining to Inoichi why there is nobody at home in his daughter's body would be a drag. Besides, as much as he complained about Ino, he liked the blonde Yamanaka. At least, when she wasn't talking about Sasuke Uchiha. So, about 30% of the time. God, how was he supposed to cure Ino of the illness known as childhood crush? He already tried having Hinata punch her in the face again, but that only motivated her. The more he thought about it, the more the reasons for his delayed return became apparent in his head, and he had to resist the strong urge to create another clone before going to the capital again. Maybe he should make that 10 additional laps into 20? Just in case. More running meant less downtime, and less downtime meant Ino talking less about the Uchiha boy. Prevention was very important, after all.
Thanks for listening.